And guys, we are live. And it's Friday night and it's 7 o'clock Central. And we have the legendary David Vizard.
Well,
there he is, the man.
Let's tone it down a bit. Right.
Bro, I gotta pump you up, man. It's all hype. It's all hype.
I've pointed out a number of times I'll put my pants on the same way you do.
But you sell the sizzle, not the steak.
Yeah. Look,
right?
if there's credit due, it's credit to all the smart people who've been in my life.
Like Andy Wood, who's sitting next to you. So if anybody who doesn't know,
this
Andy Wood.
This guy has been an incredible help with my YouTube videos. He's been inspirational. And this is not just my opinion. If you look at Andy's videos, right, and look at the style that he puts into them, you'll see that when I'm doing videos with Andy, I do much better.
Yeah.
Right? So that's not a compliment, Andy, saying you're inspirational. It's not a compliment. It's a statement of fact.
It's an energy thing, man. See,
it is.
Andy is a capable person, and because he's a capable person, when you're in his sphere of influence, it solidifies all of your positive qualities. This is a common thing.
We've been working together, close to 20 years now. I would say we're 17.
2004.
Yeah, so it's been a minute.
It's 18 years, right? And I remember you were sitting on that stool, right?
Yeah.
Just like that, and I'm sitting here, and you looked at me and you said something like, you're David Vizard.
Yeah, I recognized him right away.
My name's Andy Wood, right? And you started talking about the cars you were doing. We got into that conversation. Yeah. We went into Tony's place to get some piece of whatever that should have taken 2 minutes, and about 45 minutes later we left. Yeah.
All right, so before we get into the topic of anything, this is like lots of people watching this, I'm sure, want to know. So we have this match race, we have this grudge race between the New York City street rat and his little 318 Dodge taxi cab 4-door car, and the brain trust of you guys right there and Casper. What is going on with this? Because people want to know.
All right, so the truth is, header purgatory, you know, and when I get it back, you will see a video just on, you know, I've always worked on my own stuff, done my own thing, but this was the first time that I ventured out and thought, well, I'm going to let someone who builds headers build them for me. And man, has it been a learning curve. I mean, it's taken way too long, way too much money, and we'll get all into that in the video, but I'm at the end of the road, and bottle rocket's going down. You know, people, the doubters, we got to make it happen. Tell them this race is going to happen.
Bottle rocket is sitting there.
A competitor.
Yeah.
Bottle rocket is sitting there. It's literally on the trailer. I'm not even taking it off the trailer anymore. I'm not doing anything to it. It's sitting on the trailer. It's got a full bottle of nitrous. The only thing I'm going to do is check the tire pressure, pour some fuel in it, and drive to wherever it is that we're going to race. So I'm ready to go, brother, man. I'm ready.
Really, I can't talk junk because I don't even have a running truck yet. So you know what I'm saying?
That's okay. Just Mopar Joe. You know Just Mopar Joe?
Oh yeah. Good guy.
Great guy. He wants to race both of us. He messaged me yesterday. We talked yesterday, and he wants to race me. He wanted to race you at the No Name Nationals, and that never happened. So we're gonna have to figure out something where we can get Just Mopar Joe in here, and he can get winners. He can take on the winner.
He can't be first, but he can be next.
Right. So let's talk tech, because that is what David is all about, and David is our special guest tonight. And camshafts. Now you've been doing stuff with camshafts, and I think. Oh, sorry. I was just looking at the list over here. You've done a couple of videos on camshafts, and we wanted to talk about camshafts in general. So I want to watch the comments over here to see what questions or input or anything like that people have. But David, why don't you tell us what you've been working on lately?
Tell them the beginning of the one.
Yeah. this 128 deal that I put out, right, it was originally intended just as a throw-out thing to help guys not get the wrong lobe centerline angle.
Now,
Right.
define the 128 thing for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, it's a formula that if you've got a 10.5 to 1 small block Chevy, right, define those 2 points, 10.5 small block Chevy, then there's this formula and it starts off 128. I can't remember what the rest of it is. It's not a very complicated formula, right? And you work it out and it will give you the lobe centerline angle. Now, if the compression ratio goes up and down on that, you have to modify that number.
Okay, so it's a formula.
It's a simple formula. And what it is it's part of my massive CAM program, right? And I mean massive. When it starts its calculations, it's on the road to, I don't know, several thousand subroutines, right? And what happens is you put in your basic engine, right, into the data that it asks you for, right? And that includes all the simple things that you should know, right? Valve size, spore stroke, compression ratio, the RPM at which you want peak power, the pressure wave you want to utilize in the intake, which usually is 3 or 4, right? Just a whole load of stuff. And it's got a little note which comes up, which explains it to you what it is if you don't know, right? Now this is meant for professional engine builders, right? And what happens is when you say go, right, it'll come up with all these answers that will tell you for that spec engine, it will tell you what your lobe centerline angle needs to be. It'll tell you how many horsepower, how many foot-pounds it makes, gear change point, the amount of flow you need in the cylinder head, the amount of cc's you need in the cylinder head, the engine vacuum that it will make, and so on. Well, excuse me a moment.
Sure.
Yeah, it's my better half. I better answer it. G?
Hi.
I'm on TV.
Oh, that's okay because I'm here with Tricia. So
Yeah.
I came home about 30 minutes ago and then I know you're busy. So
Yeah,
I'm here.
yeah.
Okay.
All righty, cheers.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Tell her we said hi. Bye.
So basically, this
So the big program now. So one of the problems that people get looking through a catalog is it is absolutely no problem to spend a half an hour finding a profile, usually the wrong one. Now, how often is it the wrong one? At least 95% of the time, it's not the optimum cam, right?
I just go to the bottom of the list.
Well, I like that expression. The one at the bottom of the page will give you the most horsepower, right? Well, of course, you know.
I know that's not true. I know that's not true.
It's a condemnation of, but it will show you the cam you need and the part number, right? And you can find it in under 90 seconds, right? I would say most likely under 60, right? Now, you can also let's say you've got an idea of the engine, but you don't have any parts. You can then go to the cylinder head section and it will sort through all the cylinder heads to find one with the right spec for it, the right flow figures for the valve lift it's going to use, the right port volume so you get the right velocity. It will have angle or straight plug. It will name what the springs are on it, or if they don't have springs, it comes just without them, etc. So now, out of some 200 small block cylinder heads, you can choose the head that it's supposed to have to go with that. Then you can go on and you can choose the intake manifold for it. It will say, this intake manifold flow size, with this combination here, you need this manifold. And it doesn't just say, oh, you need a 2-plane. It gives you the part number for it. right? Then it goes on to
Wait,
the.
I don't know if I'm understanding this correctly. Are you saying that based on the camshaft profile and the load separation angle, you can now backtrack and find what
This
has?
program, you can.
With my program, right? And you know, when people see it, I mean, I know the last engine builder I showed it to was a pro stock engine builder, and he just
Mesmerized.
and when one of the cam company bosses saw it, he looked at me and he said, David, he said, you sure have done your homework.
Okay, let me clarify this because I understand what you're saying. I get it. I think I understand what you're saying. I think I get it. But let me just clarify for people who are watching this. You're saying that if you have a camshaft, you've got the cam, you can take the specs of the cam, most importantly, the LSA, and from those specs, design an engine around the cam using your program.
Yeah, in a broad sense, yeah. There's just a little bit more to it than that, but
Okay.
yes, what you do is when we conceive of an engine build we want, we've only got a general picture of it. So you start off by putting a general picture in. It's a bit like you're going to pour fuel into a tank, right? You're going to use a funnel, and the fuel goes dun dun dun, and it goes down. You don't just try and pour it through the hole. So initially, it's like pouring fuel into a funnel. You know it's going to go in the right place eventually, but you don't quite know what route it's going to take, right? So what happens is you put in your general concept of the engine you want, or let's say you got parts. You've already got parts. You want to utilize those. If you're stuck with them, you want to utilize those parts as best possible. So you put those parts in, and the program will say whether or not how viable it is. Let's say you put in and you call for an RPM band, and it says you need 320 CFM at the lift cams, and you only got 280. Well, you know you better start looking at a different camshaft, right? Because that one's not going to work. So, and it goes through all these parts. It'll even specify the crank, right, by part number. It'll specify the rods, lifters, etc. In fact, when I've got it finished, you'll be able to spec out an engine from the air filter to the tailpipe, including the spark plugs, right? Anybody will be able to build a winning engine.
And well, first, Dakota wants to know, how could a fellow find your cam calculator?
You can't.
You can't.
Right? I'm A, still working on it, and B, I'm working with a corporate entity to utilize it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a major cam company looking at it.
Involved, yeah, right. And so that's where it's at. Now, the idea is that
You should probably design some lifters for this major cam company while you're at it.
Bingo.
Just saying. Just saying.
right. Well, interestingly enough, it was turned down by a whole load of cam companies. I've been trying to market it, and I showed it to this camshaft company boss, and I hadn't even got a third of the way through the description, and he says, "I'm on board."
Yeah. So really, the 128 formula is a very, very simplified formula of the bigger program, right?
It's 1%.
Yeah. So let's say
not even 1% of it.
Let's say that you already have an engine built, a typical small block that the everyday guy or gal would have, right? With stock heads, and you want it to perform in a certain RPM range. Basically, there's two things that dictate the power of that engine, or torque rather. That is the LSA, that determines how much torque the engine will actually produce, and the overlap of the cam will tell you where that torque is going to be produced in RPM range. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so when you figure out those two values, it will spit out one duration number for the intake load. And it's exact. That if you have this intake load duration, and it's advertised, I've had a lot of people asking me that question, is it based off of at 50 or advertised. He had to base it off of advertised because you can have a lot of different overlap.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Based off of the cam manufacturer
Let
themselves.
me just butt in here, Andy. But here's the deal. When you go and find the camshaft on the list, and I said, that's your 90-second search, right? It gives you so much detail that the cam companies don't do. For instance, you'll have let's say we got a hydraulic. You'll have your 6,000 tappet lift. You'll have your 50, your 200, but you've also got the lobe area, right?
That's important.
And here's something that you don't ever see, right? And I think I dreamt this up. The aggression index. It will tell it from 1 to 5. It will tell you how aggressive it is. Pro stock 5, right? And but there's a number for it, right? For a pro stock, the aggression index is about 132, right? For a regular street cam, it's about 80, right? So you can look at the aggression index. So there's all these things here that you can put in. When you change your rocker ratio, right, that's going to change the lobe centerline angle you want. Now, there is one snag to this.
This would be a good point for you to tell them when you started with change your operation.
Well, yeah, that's where it started many, many years ago when I made up some rockers for a 1000cc a Mini Cooper engine, right? And I noticed on the dyno, the new rockers, they made more horsepower, but they lost power up to 4,000. And I thought, the only thing that's got bigger other than the lift is the overlap triangle. And when I ground another cam on there with about 2 degrees, when I had another cam ground with about 2 degrees less overlap, bingo, it made power. It increased the power everywhere, but at low RPM, it didn't change, right? So it never lost any power, it just got better.
He's got a visitor.
Yeah,
Little one there.
my granddaughter.
Hey,
Came in to show me the
you're so much cuter than you are.
I know. Sweetheart, I know. She got a boo-boo.
Oh.
Oh, look, Kathy brought me coffee.
Okay.
Okay, take her boo-boo away.
Let's go.
I'll see you in a little bit. We'll go watch dog videos together after this.
There you go.
So anyway, that's where it started, and that was about 1967, 66 time, right? But anyway, the thing was it didn't take me long to realize that although there was plenty of people who knew how to design profiles, there was a total lack of people who knew how to design valve events.
Well, David, I want to talk about LSA. I think that's probably the most underappreciated and misunderstood aspect of camshaft design, because everybody knows lift, bump, lift, okay, right? Duration, most people have a grasp of duration and what it actually means. But overlap and the relationship, LSA to overlap, and lobe profile, because a lot of people don't understand that not every manufacturer grinds lobes this profiles the same way. So for instance, a Lunati is grounded a different way than a comp is. Lunatis are more aggressive on their rims, like their voodoo cams.
Mm-hmm.
And that has an effect on so LSA, let's say a 108 or a 110 LSA on a Lunati cam is going to have a different effect. Same lift, same duration, but that same LSA is going to have a different effect on a grind from a different manufacturer.
That's all down to how aggressive the lobe is, or primarily it is.
Right. So now, out of the manufacturers, the common manufacturers, which ones, in your opinion, have the most aggressive lobe profiles or the most effective lobe profiles? Like their signature grinds.
Right. Assuming we don't take anything.
Nothing else.
Like we don't call up their cam designer and say, design me a cam that'll last 2 minutes, right? But make maximum power, right? I would say that probably out of the better known ones, probably comp cams, and probably followed closely or right there with them is probably Howard. I've looked at cams from pretty much everybody. No, extensive number of cam companies, right? And when it comes to aggressive cams, at the end of the day, they're all limited by the same physics. So there's not as much difference in the capability to design an aggressive cam, such as rather than the physics that limits it.
Right.
Right. I have a friend of mine who's an independent cam designer, and he's been very successful in pro stock cams for motorcycles, especially Harley Davidsons. And at the end of the day, his designs are a little bit of skullduggery on the profiles that some other companies don't do or don't know about, right? But the change, the advantage is very small.
Yeah.
Right. It really is. But the thing you have to, and I'm in a big debate on this, thing you have to be concerned with is that at the end of the day, the valve events are more important than the profile.
Okay.
You can fix a profile, right? If you've got the wrong valve events, the only way you'll fix those is to put the right ones in, right? So, that's another point of contention I have with a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm kind of maybe on the subject or off the subject. Was it Iskandarian who was playing with the concept of controlled valve float?
To be honest, everybody was.
Okay.
Right. I mean, valve lofting is probably a better term.
Throw the valve off and let it.
For instance, way back when I ran a valve lofting grind versus a non-valve lofting grind, right? Well, what we did was we fixed the lofting, right? Then we unfixed it. And it goes about 25 horsepower more unfixed.
Yeah.
Let me break this down for people who are watching this, okay? The idea of the controlled valve float or lofting is to actually, so you know how the lobe comes around and the lifter following the lobe?
Well, flies off the nose.
Yeah, it flies off the nose.
25 to 30 thousandths more lift. But now here's the difficult bit. You've got to get it to land on the other side.
Hit the right spot.
Without destroying it. Now you can't do this. No, I shouldn't say you can't do it. It's much more difficult to successfully do it with a roller tappet because they'll break.
They will.
But a flat tappet cam is much more amenable to it.
And mostly it's more prevalent in when you have a class that has a lift rule.
Okay.
That's where they try to cheat it because they're trying to cheat the rule of the lift, the max lift, to get more power.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the static lift is not the same as the dynamic lift.
No.
The dynamic lift can be
Quite a bit different.
Yeah, quite a bit different.
I imagine setting piston to valve clearance with a combination like that could be a little tricky.
These days, if you want to win a big time race, everything's tricky.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Right. If you don't have the patience to sit there and achieve what's supposed to be achieved, then you are not going to be in the winner's circle, period.
Yeah. Well, just think of it this way. Think of the guy watching this who maybe who's working on his LS or his Windsor motor for his car that he's going to run off to a war in the woods next year and try to clean house, no prep, right? Some of these guys are watching this, and that's like they're not unlimited end of the line, end of the rainbow engine builders. They're rats like me or like you were at some point, and Andy, just trying to get the most out of what they got. You know what I'm saying? So
yes, when you're unsponsored, when you're semi broke compared with the big teams, right? Then you've got to make up for it somewhere.
You got to think outside the box.
That's where it is. You know, when I was doing the British Touring Car Championship, I did not have more money than everybody else. I was racing against factory teams. In fact, my crew chief worked out that we spent less money in 1 year than the next team spent at one event.
Let's go back to the whole LSA thing, because again, like I said, I think this is like the least understood and the most important part, or not the most important part, but it's a crucial aspect.
No, you hang on to that. It is the most important
It is.
part.
Okay, that's my personal feeling. And I've always felt that way. So now this is something I've speculated on. Again, I'm not you. I don't have your experience but this is how I've always speculated on the importance of LSA. Tell me if I'm right or tell me if I'm wrong. When a valve is open, pistons at top dead center, valve is open. There's a vacuum in the manifold. There's a vacuum in the runner. For the piston to overcome that and actually send everything moving in the right direction, isn't that where the LSA comes in, kind of like to break the vacuum bind?
That's half the picture. There's more than one thing going on.
Okay.
First off, let me make a statement here. A modern engine makes its power, modern normally aspirated engine makes its power by virtue of having an effective exhaust. That means it's tuned right. Right? Now, when it comes to the lobe centerline angle, imagine your exhaust and intake are two straight lines in duration, right? And they've got to overlap like this. Right, now then, we'll take that overlap block. You make a decision on the overlap based on where you want the RPM, or the program does. And then it will move that overlap up and down those 2 bars of duration and say, for the best results, it needs to be set here or whatever. And that means that you get the most effect to put energy into the charge to recoup it at the other end.
Right.
If you open the valves, if your lobe centerline angle is too wide and you open the valves too late, you never redeem that at the other end. And let me make this statement, because it's 100% solid proof, right? That if you don't get the induction right in the first half of the lift, doesn't matter what you do in the second half, won't fix it.
Right. Pretty much as soon as the valve leaves the seat.
It's the first half of the induction.
And that's where the overlap comes in, because the overlap is what is setting up that first half of the induction.
Yep.
Yes.
And then afterwards, towards the end of that, you've got your sonic pulses on the inside that are running back and forth.
And
when everything is tuned correctly,
it goes out the window.
when everything is tuned correctly, and I know that this is something both of you guys know. Most people don't pick up on it, but I know that you know. When everything is right, when an engine is right, there's a tone that happens at around 3,000 to 5,000, 6,000 RPM. There's a special tone that happens, and you can tell it's when the sonic pulses of the intake come in sync with that overlap and match the exhaust. And there's like a resonance that most people don't hear.
Change tone.
But you'll know it. You'll know your engine is right. You know your combination is right. All you have to do is just you wing it, and you just listen, and you say, that's right. The cam is right. The intake's right. The exhaust right. That's something I always listen for.
And I've got a little comment there. When I was teaching at UNC, right, one of my star pupils there, he had to build a big block, right, and this guy soaks up tech like a giant blotting paper, right?
True.
Brilliant guy. I don't know what his IQ is, right, but it's way higher than mine. Anyway, he built this big block, right, sticking to everything that I said. We put it on the dyno, right? Now, he dynoed quite a few small blocks. I say quite a few, 3 or 4, right? We started this up. Now, the nice thing is I knew beforehand he got everything right. And when we ran that engine, it was like the most wonderful competition destroying music you've ever heard, right? And after the first pull, he turned to me and he says, I think I've just had an orgasm. Right? And the guy running the dyno was a very high race winning dyno operator, right? And he said, boy, he said that engine sure shook the building when
It's
when
like making music.
it sounded like it was making a lot of horsepower, and it was, right? Let's put it this way: when it went in the race car, in the first 200 passes, it never lost a pass.
Yeah. It was.
And sometimes it had to run against engines with 100 cubic inches more.
Let's Andy, see if you can pick some questions out of the.
All right, let's look. You know, the main reason why I wanted to do that video on the 128 is because in reality, DV has run thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dyno tests. And I have been a part of that for these past years, right? But the truth is, people out there, your average person does not have access to a dyno. And so when you buy a cam, you're paying X amount of dollars. You're either going to get the right cam or you're going to get the wrong cam. You know, the wrong cam costs just as much as the right one does. You know, and like I said in my video, you can look across all of YouTube and watch engine dyno videos, right? And you can tell just how successful that engine build is based off of how many foot-pounds per cubic inch that engine is actually making.
Yeah.
You know, that lets you know that either they know what they're doing or they don't.
Yep.
That's that simple. And, you know, and it's all about trying to get it to the average person about saying, okay, and that formula, even though it's meant for a small block Chevy, right?
Yeah.
You can tweak it to fit other engines.
Yeah.
You know, Mopar, believe it or not, is very close to the 128 because
Well,
of the
if
style.
you use 128, it works.
Yeah, it works.
In reality, it's about a half a point out. Well, we don't give
Yeah.
a damn about that.
Okay, let's answer this one here.
Okay.
Never bought a cam, complete newbie. This is from Iceman 2K10. The 128 formula gives me 103 to grease my 440. Now, how would a person get a cam ground? How do you check for piston interference? What other info is critical? 103?
You want to answer that?
Yes. With the big blocks, the problem is that nearly every big block is so undervalved that it's out of the range of cam lengths that the cam manufacturers have.
Yeah.
For instance, we've got the Iceman 2K10, right? He says it gives him 103 degrees on his 440. I assume that's a Chrysler,
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, is that the one with the giant small block Chevy head?
Yes.
Right. Well, here's the problem, right? Nobody's got a blank, a regular, already made blank that you can grind 103 on, right? For instance, a big block Chevy's got the same problem, and about 106 is as tight as you can get.
Yeah.
Now, this explains why. Because the camshaft that's put in most big blocks is way too wide on the load center line angle, why people will say, well, big blocks love compression. Well, of course they do, because raising the compression fixes the cam error. Or rather, it goes towards fixing it.
That's right.
So a big block Chevy that's got a cam in it that's, say, 3-4 degrees too wide, you raise the compression 2 points and you get 4 points worth of extra power. Right? And it's not because the compression ratio formula is wrong. It's because you are tending to fix the problem of too wide a load center line angle.
Yeah.
Right? Remember, an engine is not a bunch of trick parts. Right? It's an orchestra. Everything has to be in tune. Everything has to balance. And a statement that Andy made on his last video. You don't install what you want in the engine. You install what the engine wants. What you want is irrelevant, right? All you're asking the engine to do is make torque and horsepower for you. in a certain RPM range. You give the engine what it wants to do that job, right? Not what you dictate it should have.
That's what I've been preaching on this channel since I started.
Yeah.
You know, it's a homogenous thing. It's like you said, it's an orchestra.
Yeah. Homogeneous. What does it mean?
Thoroughly.
It's the milk. It's the thing in the milk.
Yeah.
Right. But I've been stressing that since we started this channel. It's like, it's not one thing. It's not, you can't just change this. You can't just do that. It's a package. And oftentimes the regular guy is better off using production parts because the engineers, they're not stupid. They make compromises for production purposes. But the essence of but the essence of the pieces are there. It's already been kind of science. Now maximize all of that, like the stock eliminator guys do.
Right.
You know,
one thing that, oh, I'm sorry, Tony, go ahead.
No, okay, good. No. I'm rambling.
I want to talk about something that's pretty relevant. People tend to make fun of the 3/4 race cams, right?
Right.
Those guys, we put a 3/4 race cam in it. Well, that's all marketing. That was early attempts at marketing. Okay. What do we have today? Stage cams.
You're absolutely right.
Thing.
You're absolutely right. And I got to tell you something, right? There would be a lot less confusion if they went back to marketing it as street cam, quarter race cam, half race cam, 3/4 race cam. It would be so much simpler because the average person, the average guy who's doing this, who just wants to screw around his hot rod and have fun, he doesn't have years to learn the ins and the outs and the do's and the don'ts and everything else. And if you just give him, just label this cam as, 3/4 race, it tells him, look, this is what I want. I want a car that I'm mostly going to take to the track. I'm going to cruise around every once in a while, right?
I had a question on my last video.
This is why I hate the freaking establishment. This is why I hate the establishment. Because the establishment is always forcing the science down everybody's throat when they don't really need or want to know all of that exact science. They just want a simple result. And the establishment is all about one-upping themselves and becoming this much more complicated, this much deeper, this much. And okay, I get that, competitive and posturing. But for the average person, just break it down to simple basics. I've never built an engine before. All I want to do is be able to go to the track, run with my friends, and be able to cruise this thing with my kids to the ice cream place on Sundays. So I want a cam that's going to give me half race. So
Yeah. The average guy wants the driving end of it more than the technical, wanting to spend time on the technical end. He needs to, the way he or she, they look at this is, I need to know just enough technicalities here not to screw up.
Yeah.
Right.
Where I don't want to be a professional engine builder. I don't want to be a lecturer at university. I want an engine that really runs for what I've got in it.
I want to give you a little history lesson. Cam companies, say back in the 70s and 80s, typically had tighter lobe separation angles offered, in the regular profiles. Okay. What was happening is people were picking camshafts that were too big for what they needed, and they were getting a lot of complaints saying, I put a cam in my car and it made it a dog.
Right. I can't run my vacuum brakes.
So what they did is effectively said, okay, well, we know people's going to buy a 236 or 238 at 50 lobe. So we're going to widen the lobe center angles to make it more drivable, and that way we get less complaints. And if you look at a cam catalog today from any of the big cam manufacturers, and pretty much all of the LSAs are the same. And that is the wrong philosophy to have, because a 110 in a Ford and a 110 in a Chrysler and a 110 in three different worlds.
Mm-hmm. Well, that goes back to that whole thing where an engine doesn't care what name is on the valve cover.
Right.
But that's not true. And they actually do care what name is on the valve cover, because they're all designed from the very beginning. See, people take the original design of an engine or the original intent of an engine and they forget about it. right? Like for instance, you take like your Oldsmobile V8s, right? I like Oldsmobiles, right? But those were intended, they were designed from scratch, from get-go, for 2,000, 3,000 RPM cruising performance, like the Cadillac, same thing, right?
Yeah.
2,000, 3,000, 3,500 RPM, everything is designed around that range because they're going into Delta 88s and 98s, and people are going to drive them to church, and they just want to merge onto the expressway smoothly. So that engine, from the air cleaner stud to the oil pan, everything is designed around that parameter. And then you take something like, you take a performance engine, something that's designed from the get-go for performance, like the LS.
Right.
You know, I get it, it's a passenger car engine, but it was a passenger car engine that was looking for maximum efficiency. So therefore, by our terms, it's a performance engine, even a regular stock one. And people don't understand it's apples and oranges. It's two different engines made by two different people for two different purposes.
Right.
And the engineering starts there. So when people say, you know, oh, it doesn't care what name is on the valve covers, bullshit. It definitely cares what name is on the valve covers. And don't try to make something that it's not. Don't try to make an engine something that it's not. Don't try to build an 8,000 RPM Oldsmobile.
Right.
That's just stupid. Build an Oldsmobile that'll pull your house out of the ground.
Can I throw something in here?
Yes, sir.
It kind of contradicts what you're saying, but at the same time, it doesn't. Right? You've got to remember that a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine is just an extensively redesigned small block Chevy.
I'm not familiar with the Rolls-Royce.
Rolls-Royce Merlin, Spitfire, Mustang.
Oh, no. I know.
What they did was they took a small block Chevy, which didn't exist yet. They closed it up to a 60-degree V. They added on 4 more cylinders. They threw away the push rods and all that, put overhead cams with 4 valves per cylinder on. Then they tacked a blower on the back. Then they said, wait a minute, we want to make this a 5-inch bore and a 6-inch stroke, so it becomes 1,650 cubic inches. So really, it's just a small block Chevy that's extensively modified beyond recognition. It's an internal combustion engine.
Oh, I agree with that. I agree.
Squeeze, bang, power, exhaust. Yeah.
You forgot that stroke.
I've got a 3-stroke engine.
3-stroke.
Right? But, you know, how about this? The French in World War I designed a 1-stroke engine. Yeah, you got to be French to do this. And it was
Opposing pistons?
extensively.
Opposing pistons?
No. And here's the pistons went up and down the bore, but the pistons didn't reciprocate. That'll give you something to think about. Oh, and let me add one more thing. If you were to fly one of these engines, a plane with one of these engines, like my uncle did, he was a fighter pilot in World War I, right?
Oh, jeez.
First thing you
Did he have the scarf and the leather helmet?
Yeah. Go to the little boy's room.
Yeah.
Right? That's all the clues I'm giving.
You need to do a video on this engine. That's fascinating. As soon as we're done with this, I'm going to Google this.
It wasn't a very efficient engine.
It doesn't matter. It's still interesting. You know,
I
I have a bug for hit and miss engines. So
It didn't have a throttle either. There was no throttle on it.
Really?
No.
Just go. Just dump it. Go.
Full send.
Full send all the time.
No. You could slow it down and speed it up, but it had no throttle.
Okay, this just caught my eye. Like the 5-cycle Miller Yamaha 2.3 V6 motor. It was in a Mazda Millennia. I worked on one of those. It was a nightmare. The 5-cycle was actually just what they were keeping the exhaust valve closed until. Wait, the Miller cycle is where they held the exhaust valve closed until after the piston started on its way up on the stroke, I believe it was. Was that the Miller cycle?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what the Miller cycle is.
You know what? I know of the Miller cycle, but unfortunately, my little brain surgery deal has left it blank.
It was something, David. It was something where they kind of eliminated the blowdown cycle.
Yeah.
And kept the exhaust valve open or closed rather that much further in the stroke. Maybe somebody here knows the exact.
Yeah, Lewis might know it. He put that note in there, right? But no, I can't recall that.
Okay. It was only around for a short period of time, the early 1990s.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what they were trying to accomplish with it. It wasn't anything like earth shattering, but you know, what I miss is the Honda stratified charge engines. I wonder why those never caught on.
I don't know.
Too complicated.
Is that what it was?
I
At
guess.
the time, right? Now we've got these variable valve event engines, which, again, they're too complicated. Really, there is great justification for only having a 2-valve engine in terms of production cost and smoothness of running and all that, instead of a 4-valve, right? Rather than having a 4-cylinder variable valve timing, 4-valve per cylinder engine, you would be better off having a 2-valve V6. Now, of about the same size. Now, a 2-valve V6 has got 12 valves. A 4-valve 4-cylinder engine has 16 valves. There's only a small amount of difference, but here's the point. The smaller the cylinders get, the larger the valve can be in terms of valve area versus displacement. So a V6 is going to cost about a third less to make. It is going to be smoother, and I'm talking about a 60 degree V6.
Yeah.
It's going to be smoother, the crank's going to be stronger, it can be lighter, it's a more robust engine, takes up less room, etc., etc. And it'll have better torque characteristics if it's done right.
Yeah.
Right? And yet we're all paying for these 4-valve engines. I mean, I'm glad to see that Cadillac came back to a 2-valve engine. That 4-valve engine they designed, the North Star engine, I had one of those apart. It was, in terms of making a race engine, it would have been a great basis, right? And a good 2-valve engine can match or even beat the torque output of a 4-valve engine up to about 4,500. Well, when was the last time you saw Granny with her North Star equipped Cadillac turning 4,500 RPM? She didn't. Now they've got the LS engine in a 2-valve, basically a 2-valve engine in the
Better deal.
newer Cadillacs, right? And boy, they sure do drive good, right? And then they stick a supercharger on it, an efficient supercharger. Why do we want 4 valves a cylinder?
They've been tricking themselves out of the park since the 1980s, all of the manufacturers. It's just like, I was just having this conversation. I don't remember who I was talking to about this. Might have been you, Andy, about the Ford, the 4.0 V6.
Oh, yes, it was me.
What a beautiful engine that was. Are you familiar with it, David?
Are we talking about
the 60 degree 4.0 V6?
Yeah.
Now, I can't remember what the cylinder head design was.
Well, they screwed it up. It was a
2-valve pushrod motor.
And then they made it overhead cam and ruined it.
Right. Destroyed it. They took this reliable thing that would go 300,000 miles without ever having a problem. And for no good reason known to man or beast, they went
marketing
with it.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing.
One of their better ideas, it didn't work.
Please. And now Ford was the one who always was overhead cam, crazy overhead cam, single overhead cam, dual overhead cam. They do the Godzilla and it's got a cam where it belongs, where God intended it to be, and push rods. I mean,
I've always said that overhead cams is an answer to a question
that nobody ever asked.
Bingo.
That nobody ever asked.
Right. There's from the performance aspect, there's a nice good reason for having overhead cams, right? But if you stick with 2 valves and a single overhead cam like a Pinto engine, the price that you pay for it is very, very minimally more. And I would say basically the 2-valve overhead cam concept is probably the best bang for the buck out there. But it only beats the pushrod engine by a little bit right up the top.
Well, with an inline, I agree with you. You know, like the Pinto motor is a perfect example.
If we're doing a push rod, if we're doing a V6, then the push rod starts to make sense. Now, I would tend to go for an overhead cam, but that's because I'm leaning towards that horsepower thing, an RPM. But to be honest, if I was a production engineer, I would put in a setup where it used short push rods, a very well designed rocker deal, and because we're getting push rod engines now to turn RPM that
Never would have thought possible.
Okay, so would you agree that to around 6,500, 7,000 RPM, it's flip a coin, overhead cam or push rod. They're both going to perform the same. It's only once you're over $7,000. Who in the real world ever runs anything over $7,000?
Well, you've got a point there, Tony. But I think that in terms of dynamics, there's enough smart camshaft and valve train dynamicists out there to be able to build a production line valve train with the modern technology that will surpass that 7,000, and we won't even think twice about it. I think that if we had only ever stuck to push rods, right now, I would think that you would have been saying, who needs more than 8,000? But I see your point there. What's happened is push rod development outside of the cam industry has almost come to a stop.
Yeah.
Right? And based on that, your 7,000 RPM is very realistic.
But that's what I'm saying. In other words, like in a realistic world, the simplicity, an engine is going to be operated under 7,000 RPM, which if you're talking about the people who are watching this video right now, or this live, that's 99.99% of them will never see the sweet side of $7,000. And if they do, it's just because they've got too much gear and they're running on a quarter mile instead of an eighth mile. And they're
or they got a small up four.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know what I'm saying? It's like the effective, the useful range of the amount of useful applications above 7,000 RPM, you start to get into a smaller and smaller and smaller click.
Yeah.
So, but that's just my opinion.
And that's exactly the reason why on my engine, Mixed Up Boss, I set it up when me and David were first talking about it. I wanted peak power at 7,000. Because I drive this thing.
How far out were we?
It was dead on. But you see what I'm
How
saying?
you use my cam program?
Yes.
And how much horsepower did it predict?
About 700 horsepower. We made 708. We were 3 foot-pounds short on torque.
And it predicted 600 foot-pounds of torque, and we made 597, and that was because Andy needed another day on the dyno.
Well, no, what we did is we took the specs from his program.
And found the closest cam.
I went through every cam manufacturer out there, and I found the one that had the closest specs to it. And the ironic part about it, this camshaft had all of what would be considered normal specs for an engine trying to make that kind of power up there. I had very well respected people in the industry tell me, oh, you need 15 degrees more duration. You need a lot wider lobe separation. You need this and you need that. And I told them, I said, this is going in a 4,000-pound truck. I need it to haul 4,000 pounds, drive it daily on the street, and not have to change valve springs every couple months. Meaning you got to have a profile that the aggressive level is down to where it'll live, and then make the available power that we were trying to get. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it did it. I really wanted 750. That was just Andy's wants, not what David was wanting. Because when we first talked about it, 700 sounds good, but 750 sounds better. But at the end of the day, I've got an engine that's making 525 foot-pounds all the way down at 3,500, and it carries that same foot-pounds all the way to 6,900 RPM. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it has torque curve of like a table.
David, both of you guys, there was a video I've been considering doing on tuning through valve lash, altering cam timing through valve lash. David, how much validity do you put? I mean, obviously mechanically it works if you're closing down the valve lash or advancing the events.
Actually, it can be more productive than most people think. On the other hand, sometimes it's not, and that's really because of how the opening ramp is done, right? But for the most part, you will find that if you lash the valves on the loose side, right, you'll have better torque output. Although at the top end, it may not make quite the power. I don't believe that it's due to the shortened up duration. I think what happens is the valves don't seat quite as well as they could do in a shorter time because they're banged down on the seat too hard.
Well, if you're opening up the lash, you're effectively retarding the cam.
If you open up no, because the lobe center line stays the same. Now, okay, let's assume a symmetrical or near symmetrical profile.
Okay.
Right. If you open up the lash, you're reducing the duration, but not all the duration is effective. When you have very slow, if you tighten them up, tighten the lash up, and the lifters on the ramp, rather than extending the duration and getting the benefits of longer duration, you're just getting the benefits of the slow heat, right? And it definitely doesn't work. For instance, one that I can remember, if you factory calls for a 12 thousandths lash on a series engine.
David's saying hi to you.
Hi.
You have to be quiet. You don't say anything, okay?
But it's about 3 horsepower more if you set them at 15. Mm-hmm. Now, let me make a statement here, right? This is a lot of people say you don't want to believe everything you see in a magazine. Boy, I found out the hard way. Many years ago, I read an article in Hot Rod magazine. Now, I was still in England racing minis, and I think this was probably about 1967-ish, right? And this guy was writing an article on about a lash measuring deal that used a dial indicator. You could set your lash very, very accurately. And they were at a chassis dyno. And the results they got were that when you set the lash with this dial indicator compared with feeler gauges, it was 60 horsepower more at the wheels. And I thought to myself, at the time, I thought, my God, I didn't know it made that much difference. And I went to all of this deal of making up one of my own for a mini engine, right? Got up on the chassis dyno, and now I'm very good at setting lash with feeler gauges, right? And I think after I set them up, the power curve was within 1 horsepower all the way up, right? Now, what I will say is, when we stuck a muffler on it to load the car back on the trailer, because we had to drive it out to the street, right? The valve train purred. It didn't clatter. It purred, right? And I'm sure that every single lifter made the same amount of noises as you'd expect a lifter to make, but they were all identical. So instead of going clacker, 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 like this, it just went.
I love that sound.
Wow, that was worth it just for that. And so I made a point of being very, very careful about how I set for a street motor.
When we were running the nitro motors, we used to tune through lash, just closing down like on the exhaust side.
Yeah.
If the motor was showing signs of detonation, you close the lash on the exhaust side to get the valve open just a little bit sooner. And if you were looking for power, you open the lash, and it'll hold the valve closed that much longer.
I got you.
So
I think a nitro motor might obey slightly different.
Slightly different, yeah, exactly. Completely, it's apples and oranges.
You managed to tap into that, Tony. So I think unless guys are running nitro motors on the street, Put your hand up if you're running nitro on your street motor. Oh
No, I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, he's just giving an example.
So
You know who taught me that? You know who told me that? Keith
Yeah.
Black himself.
Really?
Yes.
That is
Keith
awesome.
Black. Did Keith Black play the dumb engine builder trick with you? I told him once, don't act so dumb, Keith. I know you're the other end of the scales is stupid. And he said, wow, you saw through that quick, didn't you?
David, I didn't know him the way that you did. This was back when I was in my late 20s, and I was desperate to learn anything I could. And I managed to corral him for a quick conversation.
Did you go to
And that
his
was
shop?
Yes, once.
Did you see the toilet? Did you ever use on the back of the door it says, speed kills, run pink and live.
You know, Ed Pink is still kicking.
I know.
He's
Right.
got to be what,
gotta be up
95?
Yeah. at
Never
least
did.
that. Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you know Ed Iskandarian's coming up for his 100?
That's
Yeah, yep.
something like that.
Yeah. He's same age as my mom was. He was born the same year.
Wow.
Right. Now there's a guy. Now, I believe to bring back the point that Andy was making about the full race, half race, 3/4. I think that Ed either came up with that or popularized it. One of the two. Right. Ed was a very versatile guy. He was good at spotting marketing things and technical things. Right.
David, explain the fifth cycle.
Oh, that's the overlap.
I know, but
You've got
explain
an exhaust that works. You've got two induction cycles. You've got the induction caused by the scavenging of the exhaust and the induction caused by the piston going down the bore. Now, here's an interesting thing. The suction on the intake valve, the pressure drop across the intake valve, is far bigger from the exhaust going out the bore.
But that's what I said earlier.
It's from the piston going down the bore.
That's what I said earlier. That's the importance of overlap.
How about this then? To put some figures to it, I remember running some pressure tests at some university or other on a big block I had. And I was demonstrating to the students this deal. And we had 11 times more suction from the exhaust than we have from the piston at RPM between peak torque and peak power. I think it's like 4,500. 11 times more. So when they say, well, the pistons, peak draws when the piston's this far. No, it's not. The peak draw on the intake valve actually happens some point around about 10 degrees after top dead center. But it varies from engine to engine. So don't take that as being a concrete cover-all deal.
Well, that's what we were talking about before. That there's that moment of resonance where the pulses in the intake runner match, that overlap period matches the exhaust, and it all becomes where the pulse is on its way down. It meets that overlap period. It meets that giant suction from the collector and down the header tube, and it's supercharged. The engine becomes supercharged at that point. Normally aspirated, supercharged.
That's
a good way to put it.
Yeah. Tony, that is absolutely a totally precise way of putting it. It acts as a supercharger, and the thing is there's a lot more horsepower in that. When you use that pressure wave to draw out the intake, right? That pressure wave or the velocity of the gases and the pressure wave and everything concerned is about 60 horsepower per cylinder. So you've got 60 horsepower that you could use to suck in a new intake charge to help it. Right? That's why I said earlier on, a modern high-performance engine lives on its exhaust system.
Yeah.
All performance engines do. And that concept, that's how all of the engines, any engine that I set out to build or work with, that's my goal. My goal is to get the pulse, that overlap period, the exhaust to all work in one cohesive. And that's how you make big power from shit.
Yep. That is a very underrated resource for street guys. And that's what prompted me to design my own muffler. When I first tested turbo mufflers, I thought this is a piece of crap. And I tested everyone's out there, right? And finally I made my own, and actually that turned out to make me a lot of money, right?
Okay, this is a great one, especially for you, Andy. Daniel Riffle, I want to know how Nitrous expects.
Yeah, I've got that. I did all the preliminary testing for cams on Nitrous cams, right?
You can't let Andy shine with one of these things?
Oh, no.
No.
Well, I learned from that.
I'm sorry, right?
I just pulled that bit out and put it
I'm
here.
in my element here. Basically, the intake lobe needs to be the same place as it would have been for a normally aspirated engine.
Right.
That means that but you need to open because people don't design cylinder heads for nitrous motors, you need to open the exhaust valve sooner so you can get rid of all that excess gas. Now remember, we try to put in valves which are appropriate size ratio, right? Big intake, small exhaust. Well, when you pour oxygen in the form of nitrous oxide into a cylinder, right? As far as the exhaust valve is concerned, it thinks suddenly the displacement of the engine has got way bigger, and then the intake valve's got way bigger. And it says, wait a minute, I'm just a little guy here. I can't deal with all this.
Yeah.
So you have to open it sooner.
Yeah.
Right? Now,
Or put it larger.
or put a larger valve in.
Yeah.
Now, when I do a nitrous motor, and I don't tend to, these days, I don't tend to use heavily nitrous engines, but I do get a lot of extra power from them because I know how to make use of that extra oxygen going into there in the most efficient way. So it's like, I remember doing a test with Mike Thermos, and I said, how much horsepower should this make? And he said, 150. Right, and I said, watch this. And I hit the button, and it was 270.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not using any more nitrous than the guy that had was
150, right.
twice the amount of nitrous. Now, here's the nice thing about it. I made that extra 270 with less stress on the engine than the 150 made. Right?
And what was the key?
Extremely good exhaust flow. Now, it was a small block Chevy, and I think I used a 1.9 inch intake and a 1.75 exhaust, where I really went to town on seat design on it. So the blowdown was boom.
Okay.
Like that. And it worked very well. And
what was the seat angle on that?
This what?
What was the seat angle on the exhaust? You remember?
I'm pretty sure it was a conventional 45, but I used what was currently the thing to use in cup cars at that time. I was also doing some cup car stuff, right? So it did have a high flow coefficient at low lift. It was
so it wasn't like a 30-degree seat or anything?
Not on that one, no. Now, on engines where I couldn't put a bigger valve in, right, I've used a 30-degree seat to good effect. Yeah. Right? That does work. And my current converter, a small block head to a nitrous one, right, to make up for that, I use a 39-degree seat. Yeah. Right? That's a good compromise between 45 and 30. 30-degree seats are good so long as you do all the other things associated with it, because their seating ability is not as good. They don't have that.
They'll bounce and do all kinds of
things. They'll bounce easier and all that. So you have to design around a 30-degree seat. You can't just change to a 30-degree seat. There's more to it than that.
Well, that's more or less where the three-angle valve job comes from, where you're maintaining the 45.
As
the primary seating surface.
Yeah, that's a simplified production line solution to the problem, right? To get the blowdown right, I go to a lot of trouble to make sure that discharge coefficient of the valve is very high at low lift, right? So on my nitrous heads where I'm forced to use a stock valve sizes, at the point the valve opens, the exhaust valve, a 1.6 exhaust valve will look nearer like it's 1.8.
Yeah.
Right? And consequently, the flow down is very good. Now, to go back to Daniel, right? Basically, with a nitrous cam, you spread the lobe centerline angle, and you put the cam in more advanced. So now it sounds like it's a lot different. It isn't. If you spread the lobe centerline angle and then advance the cam, you may come back to the intake centerline that you had when you had a normally aspirated, right? The intake phase of the cam doesn't need much change, right? The nitrous is going to go in regardless, right? What you need to do is focus on the early opening of the exhaust, and just opening that exhaust valve early means that your cam is now wider lobe centerline angle and more advanced. My typical nitrous cam for a street would be somewhere like 280, 290, put in at about 8 degrees advance, and where was I going with this?
We're talking about your typical
And
nitrous.
the lobe centerline angle would be about 4 degrees more.
Okay, so you're talking about something in the 112 range?
Let's say we had a 350 Chevy. I'd put in somewhere around about 111, 112. This is for 150 horsepower kit.
Why do you want so much? Why do you want so much dynamic compression with that 8 degrees of advance on the cam?
Well, because the intake pulse, we want, if it's a street nitrous setup, you want that engine to run nice without the nitrous, right? And the beauty about a nitrous cam is it runs very nice on the street. Doesn't quite make the low end torque, right? But it's a minimal drop in torque, and the amount of torque it makes at low speed is dependent on where the intake valve closes. Putting in the nitrous doesn't change or doesn't really affect where you want to close the intake. So you close it the same place, and the fact is because you're going to open the exhaust valve earlier, right? That makes the overlap go up. So you spread the lobe centerline angle so that the valve, all of your extra exhaust valve timing is at the beginning of the opening phase. Everything up to the overlap and all that stays the same. So when you quote that cam, right, effectively, you tell them, or you tell somebody, yeah, well, the cam's on a wider lobe centerline angle and it's 6 to 8 degrees advanced. Well, it sounds like a totally different cam. It's
not.
It's the same cam, but you've opened the exhaust valve 10 degrees sooner.
Right.
That's brilliant.
Right?
See,
yeah, that works very well.
Yeah, let me tell you my experience. So when trying to run a lot of nitrous on a small motor, you know I'm a mod motor guy, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. You can actually get it to where the engine will not digest any more nitrous and it will actually come out the top of the carburetor going down the track until you fix the cam timing, what he's talking about. Then you can you fix the cam timing and put in the larger exhaust valve than what you would normally have and increase the exhaust flow as much as you can, because it's all dependent on getting it out.
Yeah.
You know, there's only so much you can suck into the engine, you know, off of given displacement, but it's got to be able to get out everything that you put in it.
That's it. That actually sums it up. Let me just add one more thing to that, right? You can always put in enough nitrous to blow the engine up.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
So what you've got to do is stop just shy of putting enough in to blow it up and say, now I've got this much cylinder pressure I can get. I've now got to use that as best possible. And that does not include putting connecting rods out on the.
He's giving you tune-up advice from Bottle Rocket. That's what he's
I'm
doing.
listening. He's going to spec me the next Camshaft
Oh,
engine. But
you
let's,
better run him,
Yeah.
right? Oh, now I'm
Yeah.
stuck,
yeah, I'm racing both of you guys.
right?
I'm
Now,
racing
if
both of you guys.
He's going to be pissed off at me.
Nah. My wallet would be a lot thinner, but that's about it.
No, you're going to spec my next Cam, David.
No problem.
No, seriously, I'm building another engine for the car now. I've got the one that's in the car that I want to use, but I am building a bigger valve engine, a whole different concept still based on a 318, and I need a cam for that one. We'll talk. I'll give you a call.
Oh, I did want to say something here, Tony.
Yes, sir.
Remember the last conversation we had, which I don't know, that was probably
It's been a while.
We haven't talked in about a year, bro.
A year?
No,
It has been that long?
I believe so.
No, I remember our conversations, right? Because they're to be remembered. But here's the point that you made about, you were talking about the 100 mile per gallon carburetor or the 100 mile per gallon concept, right?
Right.
I'm going to do a video on that, right? Now, the thing is I have decided that I'm going to make this video an epic. I made that decision because what happened was is you dealt with it in a very basic coverall manner, and I thought, what a great introduction to my video, right? So I was going to start the video and then say, you need to go and see whatever channel or whatever address gets to your thing first, right? And then I said, now that video was the inspiration for doing this one, and that's where I'm going. And I'm now going to go into the hardcore technical stuff. So if you're not into technical stuff, don't watch it.
Yeah, I just like talking about bolt-on accessories, really.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Chrome valve covers. Well, I had to. Everything I do on my channel has to be as generic as possible. It has to be as broad as possible.
Yeah.
Because I have a generic and broad audience. Some people are really tech heads, and some people are just cutting their teeth. And I don't want to alienate the people who are just cutting their teeth, and I don't want to bore the people who've been down the block. So it's like
you're walking a tight wire.
We walk a tight wire, and it's not an easy balance to maintain. It's you know what I mean. But yeah, we need to get together and actually, because I tell you what, gas prices are low right now because of shenanigans. They're going to go nuts soon, and I think that all of this can be very topical before we, you know what I mean? Like right now, we're talking about nitrous and LSA and burn rubber and everything else. But we got weird times coming, and everything that we're talking about right now is going to have a lot of.
How many turns have you got on your electric motor? Right, I've stepped mine up.
I'll never have an electric motor.
Electrics are, forget about that. That's a pipe dream that ain't never going to happen in our lifetimes. Never.
Well, I've got a friend of mine who's used to driving some very fast race cars, and he's got a Tesla, and he just loves it.
I'm not down in it. I've never said a bad word about electric cars in general, because to me, it's just another type of car. And there's no difference to me between a Tesla and, let's say, a Toyota Camry or a Lamborghini. It makes no difference.
Well, there is.
But it has no soul, Tony.
About 800 horsepower.
But it has no soul.
None of these things have any soul to me. You know what I mean? So
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Who wants to hear an electric top fuel car?
No. That's sacrilegious.
All right, let's see what kind of questions we got here. We have guys. I'm sorry if I've been ignoring anybody in the comments over here. I'm sure I'm speaking for these guys too. But once we get to yapping, it's like, you know what I mean. So let's go through here. Andy, do you see anything that pops out?
He says, David, have I ever built an LPG motor, a propane engine? Yes, maybe about 2, and they were just for work trucks, right, to save fuel. In England, fuel is big time expensive, even before all this gas crunch and all that. I mean, let's go back 3 years. It was like $11 a gallon, right? Now, if we go back to the 60s, early 70s, there was a discount that you got if you ran propane. And so a lot of people turn their business vehicles for propane.
Here we go.
Okay, what's on the 2B? What's on the Ube asks, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Right on the
Should
menu.
turbocharged engines have
Is-
less overlap?
On the menu, right? Now, I'm just doing a video now, and it's why turbo cams are mostly a ripoff, right? And it's because the overlap depends totally on the pressure ratio across the engine. Most turbo kits are a question of getting it installed. And that is the street-orientated, cost-conscious turbos, right? And so they commonly have a lot more exhaust back pressure than they do boost pressure. So that if a conventional cam is put in there, during the overlap, exhaust goes into the intake. So do we want overlap in that situation? Well, yeah,
No.
probably not, right? Now, I did some tests with a very good friend of mine, Al Nemo, down at Performance Techniques, Turbo Techniques Performance.
Yeah.
Is it Turbo Techniques? And one of the cams we tried, and the guy at he said this is never going to work. It had negative 30 degrees of overlap. In other words, the exhaust would close at TDC, but the intake didn't open until 30 degrees after, right? Now, the interesting thing is that motor, well, it idled. You could stand a full glass of water on the engine and it wouldn't spill it, right? It idled, and it idled so slow. I think it was like about 450 RPM. And they say, well, what power did you use? Well, we didn't lose any power. What we did find from it was less sensitive to octane value because the charge going out into the intake didn't heat up the intake charge, right? And then have to re-inhale it. And secondly, there wasn't much duration on the intake valve. It was like 260 odd, and it made over 1,000 horsepower at the wheels, and that was a single turbo 350.
Wow.
Right? And the low speed torque on it was phenomenal. You know, I could put it into third gear. It was a push button prepped turbo 400 tranny. We put it into top gear at the lights, stand on it, and by the time I got to the other side of the lights, it was smoking the tires.
Yeah. Basically, when it comes to turbo cams, you need to know that pressure ratio before you can even go down that rabbit hole, because that's all dependent on it.
Yeah, if the cam guy says, oh, we've got a great turbo cam, he is lying through his teeth if he hasn't asked you what the pressure ratio is first. Because
couldn't they more or less assume by going by let's say common setups?
No, there are certain things that save these guys from being totally, how shall I say, put down for selling dud products, right? And that is when you go to a turbocharger, you can screw it up pretty bad and still make blinding horsepower, right? When I was working for Chrysler, I was a consultant doing a turbo motor that was supposed to compete with the Lotus Cortina twin cam, right? And I could get from their chief engineer any cam Lobe I wanted from their range, and I tried lots of different overlaps and things like this. But my main goal was always to keep the back pressure down, and I finally got to the point where I had back pressure lower than the intake pressure. And at that point, I found that the camshaft needed for it followed almost perfect, normally aspirated practice. And now I was also consultant for a year, and that'd be 89, to Dave Mountain Race Engine, which incidentally is the winningest engine building company on the face of the planet. We established that when you've got even pressure across the engine or even slightly more intake, that normally aspirated cams work exactly as they do in a normally aspirated engine.
Yeah, it just thinks it's working at a higher pressure value rather than 14.7 atmospheric pressure.
Yep. So you can get sold the wrong cam and still have a car which will hemorrhage your eyeballs. But you're stressing the engine.
I want to take it technically. I want to take it down a couple of notches, just to bring bring everybody who's hanging into the conversation. I want to ask you a hypothetical question. Okay, so let's talk in like the broadest possible terms. Production. So you're going to build one engine, right? One engine, and it's got to be something that's streetable and give you biggest bang for the buck. And you have to base it off of a traditional production V8. What engine and what power adder?
Oh, turbocharger, almost without doubt.
Okay.
Now, I say that almost without doubt. The Magnuson blower in a drive cycle can rival a turbocharger.
Magnuson is a high helix?
It's the one that Jerry Magnuson designed that ended up on Pontiac and Mercedes.
Right, I'm familiar with them.
Like the LSA.
Yeah.
Cadillac. Yeah.
All right, so turbocharged, but what engine? Which engine and why?
Well, I'd have to say, if I'm sticking to a pushrod engine, right?
It doesn't have to be pushrod. It could just be a production V8, something that anybody can go right now and either on Facebook Marketplace or even not saying, well, I'll have a 4-valve engine, right? It's going to be a street motor. Yes.
Right? If I've got a 3,500 pound car and I've got 1,000 horsepower at the wheels, there's not much chance I'm going to want 1,050. Right? Now, look, the Tesla's a 4,000 pound car with 1,000 horsepower at the wheels, and it does the quarter mile in the high 8s. I think it's the best.
10 to 9.
They right on 9 seconds at 150 something, right? And I think that is approaching adequate performance. And what I'm saying here is a 3,000 pound car with the same power is probably going to hit 160 odd.
Well, you're assuming you can hook.
Yeah, and I would say 4 valves a cylinder is a waste of time when you've got an LS engine.
So you would build a turbocharged LS?
I think that's what I would go with, yeah. The LS engine is a very well thought out engine, right? I met the guy who was the chief engineer on the project, right? And I have to say that I was very impressed with how smart he was. He was also a real snappy dresser as well. Boy, I think he wore $1,000 suits.
I'm a big fan of the LS, and I don't want one for myself, but I love watching what people do with these things.
Yeah.
You know, it's an amazing engine. I'm grateful that the LS exists because it brought so many new people into the
That's
culture.
exactly right.
You know,
people that wouldn't otherwise be here.
Yeah, like LS Fest. They have LS Fest up the road here in Bowling Green, and I make it. This year I didn't go because public appearances are hard. I mean, you know, I'm not a public guy. I like to, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
I make it to LS Fest. I go to LS Fest. I don't go to Mopar meets, but I go to LS Fest because I enjoy the energy. I enjoy watching these guys do. I think it's fantastic.
There is an engine that I'm excited that I'm going to get to work on, though, and that's a Godzilla engine.
Yeah?
I really think it has more potential than the average LS. And when I say average LS, I'm talking about nothing of the exotic like LS7 stuff. you know, you got to remember the LS has been around for well over 20 years, you know, and it's been pretty much ironed out through the years. And this is a new kid in town, and I'm excited to get involved with that. We're actually putting a Godzilla in my old Mustang.
I got to put you in touch with my friend Evan Smith.
Oh yeah.
Do you know Evan?
I watch his videos every time he comes out with a Godzilla video.
Okay, I know Evan. This is how far back I know Evan. Okay, Evan he used to work the water box at Englishtown. He was the guy who used to spray the water and sweep things up in Englishtown. And that's back when I was doing the magazines and I was doing all my street racing and started getting into the nitro cars. And that's how far back I know Evan. He was just like a 16-year-old kid working the water box at Englishtown.
That is really cool.
Yeah, I'm so proud of the way he turned out, man. He's just an amazing guy. But he's got all the connections, he's got all the people, he's got all the parts, he's got all the knowledge. I'll put you guys together. You guys will love each other.
Oh yeah.
This is the Evan Smith that used to be the editor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I worked for him. He was a great guy to work for.
Yeah.
Right? Very fussy, but I am as well. So
I taught him everything he knew about magazines because he got into the magazines at the time that I was doing it. And the magazine that he took over, Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords, was my magazine, Cars Illustrated. We evolved. After I left, they changed Cars Illustrated to Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords, and Evan started writing for them. And then he became the editor. And
I
Small world.
I did quite a bit of work with him, and he was always he was very direct, very gracious, and very polite.
He's really good people.
Right? And I got to say, there weren't many editors that I enjoyed working with, right? Most of them were, but he was definitely on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I was down in Florida last year? I hung out with him for a couple of days. But but Andy, I'll put the two of you guys together, and you two on your channels, man, you guys could collaborate. I see huge stuff that could be done. You know?
Oh yeah, it would be fun. I mean, because him and Brian Wolf have really.
Right. The next thing that's coming out of my mouth is Brian Wolf.
You know, actually, the backstory is we were going to build a 6.2 overhead cam motor to replace the mod motor. We had really good flow results when we flow tested that head.
Yeah.
But when the Godzilla came out, it was kind of like no brainer. You know what I'm saying? It fits in the car easier, you know, versus the overhead cam platform. Parts are going to be more readily available. And that's all part of the bottom dollar, you know?
It is. That's, you've got to, it's both. Tony, see if you agree with this. Don't you think there are more exciting project prospects out there than there are time to do them?
Oh, are you kidding?
This was one of them, right? Andy and I had thought about what the possibility is to build a new generation 427 camera using that.
Yeah.
Right? And we went through all the stuff we could just based on what we could find out. And it not only is it possible, but the head flows so good that it flows. It was about as much as the original camera head.
It was over.
That was it.
It was over.
That's right. It was. That engine should make more horsepower than the original camera. Right. That's before you modify the cylinder head.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, I had a friend of mine. He passed recently, Jim Barolero. And he's got Crispin's Comet. He's got a Nicholson's flip-top car. And he wanted to build a nostalgia top fuel car. And he's a camera guy. And was a camera guy. And he had a couple of them in his shop. So we talked about this, and I was gonna do the setup and the tuning on the thing, and he was gonna just build the car and run it. So I spent the better part of a year studying the camera. I mean, like every aspect of this thing, the good and the bad. But what you might find interesting, David, is that unless you're familiar with the Chrysler Hemis, the early and the late, the first generation, the 331 through 392, and the 426, The camera is an exact cross between the 392 and the 426. It's an exact cross, and you would think you were dealing with a good 392 head, like a Donovan head. It's like exact. You know, the weak link down there is the bottom end of the engine. It's just nothing you can do about it. The fucking FE is like a potato chip downstairs, and it's just what are you going to do, right? But from a cylinder head standpoint, it's anything that would work on an early Chrysler, like a 392 Chrysler, is exactly what would work on a Camry.
You know, when I had Sam Oxier Jr. on my channel, he said pretty much we had a top end that was good for 12,000 and a bottom end that would fall apart at 9.
Right.
He said
it's easier to work with the other way around.
Yeah, he said he said he built a lot of Hemis back in the day, and he said you put those two blocks side by side. He said there's drastic differences, and you can see the strength of the 426.
Yeah, they see the camera, the FE came about 2 years before the big block Chrysler.
Right.
And they Chrysler looked at the camera. Not the camera. I keep saying camera. Chrysler used the FE as inspiration for the B motor, the RB motor. The extended skirts were actually to reduce noise.
Yeah.
The extended skirts had nothing to do with strength on those engines. It had to do with the oil being slung against the pan, and it was a sound that the engine would make. It was like a hollowness. And they were looking to put these engines into high-end luxury cars. That was the goal. They had the polyspheres. They had, you know, so the deeper skirts are a copy of the FE, but the FE had had undersized saddles, and that's why if you ever look at an FE, you ever take the bearings out of an FE, the oil holes don't match up, and you can't make the oil holes match up.
No,
you're drilling through the side of the saddle. Where were they thinking? So all Chrysler did was say, all right, well here's what Ford did, and here's what worked on it, and here's what didn't. And so they added enough meat, they added enough width in the main saddle that you could have a central hole, a big hole, and be able to actually fit a bearing in there. And that was the magic. That's the success. And that's the essential difference. Well, of course, you get that weird cam oiling. The cam oiling behind the cam bearing. That weird. I don't know what. They must have been possessed by something. You know, it had to be like a demonic influence in Ford when they designed the oiling system on those engines. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm running off on a tangent.
Oh, but we can all do that.
Oh yeah.
You're just copying me.
Right, you're my inspiration for tangents. All right. We keep forgetting about our people over here.
How many have we got?
We have 344 people, and there's 344 people that need to know about your channel, David.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Yes, I'm sure that pretty much everybody that's listening, watching, knows that last May I lost not only a very good friend, but also an excellent partner, right?
Yeah.
And that has put, I knew I counted on Marvin for a lot, but I just did not realize how much he did until he wasn't there to do it. As a consequence, due to legal issues and that, which I won't go into now, it is going to be very difficult for me to take over the channel in my own name, because Marvin handled all of that, and because I'm 30 years older than him, we did it that way because it was assumed that I would pass away first. You'll notice, planning that far ahead, we assumed that we would never not be partners.
Mm-hmm.
Only it was until death us do part. Now, the problem is, without court cases and death certificates and this, that, and the other, which quite honestly, I'm not even in a fit state of health to spend much time going out of the house, right? Yard work is a real problem. But my point is this: I started the channel about, 2012, and then, but I didn't do anything with it, right? I was too busy doing other stuff. And then Marvin came along, we started our own channel. Well, that one was still going, but it was dormant. And so what I did, rather than go through all of this rigmarole, right, I revamped that one, reintroduced it. But in so doing, I lost 27,000 subscribers and a whole load of money, which I was actually working for to make this a full-time job. Here's my problem. Physically, I'm not doing too good. But YouTube stuff, I can do that sitting down, right? My physical health doesn't really come into play. But if I want to go and port a cylinder head after an hour, I'm struggling.
Yeah, it wears him out.
Right? The only reason I can do yard work is that tractor's got a 22 horsepower engine in it, right? I get my little coffee flask and I drive around in the sunshine with my glasses on, like this, not sitting down.
Hey, I rely entirely on retard strength.
You what?
I say I rely entirely on retard strength.
On retard strength?
Yes. Never mind. It's an old joke.
It must be because I'm not following it. But anyway, I desperately need viewers and subscribers, and I desperately need you guys to not only go on there and subscribe, but also share. Look, I'm just coming up for 80. I've got lots and lots to say and not much time to say it in. I need to be able to get this, my channel, so that I'm paid, so that all I have to do is service you guys with information.
Okay.
Right now, I'm having to do this job, that job, and whatever. It's killing me.
So, David, how many subs do you have right now?
3,300.
We got 3,300, and how about this? That came up from an almost dead start 3 weeks ago.
Okay, and how many hours of watch time do you have so far?
He's able to be monetized.
Yeah.
I just checked it.
Let's get on that.
Yeah, as soon as this is over with.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna, Andy, you and I are gonna work together, and we're gonna collaborate on some stuff and get some eyes that wouldn't normally be found here on David's channel. We'll work with you, David.
Basically, what's going to start happening is you're going to start seeing me more on his channel, because I've been trying to step more into the role of helping him out.
Yeah, he's doing a great job.
And so, we're having fun doing it.
How couldn't you? I wish I was closer to you guys.
I wish you were too.
You know, I was just thinking that. God, this guy's a mind reader. Right?
I don't think we ever get anything done, though.
If you're
We're too busy focusing on little things.
If you're ever in the area, you better drop in, because I will be really pissed off if you don't.
Hey, Tony, what we would do is just turn the camera on and let it record what we're doing. You know what I'm saying? And you would have plenty of content. I promise you.
I'm just telling you, we would end up studying like patterns on things and like, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Well, Andy and I were talking the other night on the phone about hitting some of these no prep events, because it's something that we're both interested in getting involved in.
Yeah.
And maybe David can road trip with us and we can spend some time that way.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
We're getting back to something I said earlier. I bet you could think of more projects that we've got time for.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I'm interested in your 318 build that you're going to do with stock parts.
I think that would be a great collaboration, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'd like to get a good friend of mine, Steve Dulcich. I know you've had a run-in with Steve, but I think that was, you wouldn't have that run-in if you got together.
Well, I don't think it was necessarily him as much as the other guy.
Well,
yeah, it was really Freiberger.
The thing is Steve's a Chrysler guy, and not only that, he's an excellent engine builder, right? He got into this writing business from being a top-rated mechanic, right? So he's not a guy who's decided, I'm interested in cars, I can't work on them, but I'll write about it, right? He's a guy that's a bit like me, taking his life's experience. The only difference is that guy can really write, right? I've told him that he's only one step from Shakespeare, and I only know one other guy like that.
So Dean, I think, is in the comments here. that's an important note. His new channel is just David Vizard. It's not David Vizard Performance.
Okay, yeah, that's important. Just subscribe to David Vizard, not David Vizard Performance.
Thank you, Dean. I see your name cropping up here, there, and everywhere, right? So you're an easy guy to remember.
I see Fubar's here. I haven't seen Fubar in a while. Hey, Fubar, what's happening, man? Fubar
Hey,
is always
Fubar.
posting links. Yeah. So yeah, we'll collaborate. Would you like to collaborate on the stock 318 parts build and see what we can get out of a?
Me?
Yeah,
Definitely. Right?
I think we could
Definitely.
I think we could turn the internet on its side.
Yeah. Now,
well, I'll tell you what. Seriously, because we're here now, right? We're talking about this now, and I just got excited, and it takes a lot to get me excited anymore, right? David, you orchestrate this thing. You orchestrate it. You tell me what you need me to do,
well,
and I will deliver those things to you, and then we'll go
let
from
me
there.
ask you a question, Tony.
Sure.
To what extent is this going to be stock?
Stock.
So we can't port the heads in.
Yes. You can port the head.
He's wanting to keep stock cylinder heads.
What you're saying is we can only utilize stock parts.
Yes.
So
only
can
stock
I
parts.
Summarize that. We can only build an engine where we remove metal.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So we remove metal and
we can regrind the stock cam.
yes.
We can recondition lifters, etc. We can port the cylinder heads. We can deck the block. We can bore it, but we cannot.
Have you got a dyno picked out yet?
No, but I imagine you guys would.
Yeah. So
would you let me ask Greg if you could run it on his dyno that he did the engine challenge?
Well, that was where I dynoed my engine.
We'll find out. Okay, here's how I would look at this, right? It has to be the parts that go into this engine have to be available through Rock Auto.
Okay, Rock Auto.
Oh, okay.
Okay, like so. In other words, like no modified or aftermarket parts. It has to be that you take a complete
Rock
stock.
Auto does do some aftermarket parts, don't they?
Do they?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So you want to keep stock stamp rockers, or you want
Yes.
to do the 273 stuff, or what?
No, stock stamp rockers, but we can modify them for ratio or anything that needs to be done like that.
Yeah.
So basically, the idea is to take an engine, right, that we know has a maximum perfect, in all world perfect output of 230 horsepower, because that's what they dynoed them at the flywheel in 1970.
Now, okay, I got one question. Well, I have another question here. Tony,
Yes, sir.
pistons. We can put in oversized pistons, right?
Yes, as long as they're standard rebuild.
What?
So you want to?
But so only new parts we can put in, I would say, would be gaskets, bearings, pistons, rings.
Right, the normal wear parts.
Yeah, the
Right.
normal wear.
Right
And it
now,
has to have the stock intake manifold. It has to have the stock carburetor.
Okay.
Okay, which is the BBD.
is that a
Two-barrel.
carburetor? Oh, it's a 2-barrel.
Yeah.
I was going to say, didn't that engine come with a thermoquad on it at one time?
No, not that engine.
The later one for a short period of time.
Yeah.
The police package, 1985, 1986.
But you're wanting to keep it 2-barrel, right? 2-barrel in the stock intake, 2-barrel intake.
Right. The idea is to take the least thing that Chrysler ever offered, something that anybody can work with. And the idea here is to find out what the tricks are worth. Like, in other words, without adding parts, but just modifying and refining the stock.
What's
parts.
there?
What's there? What can we get out of this thing? And I'm thinking we could go. I think it could make 300 horsepower. I might be out of my mind. I don't know, but I think it could make 300. I think it could make 300. It's a flywheel.
I'm pretty sure
We can get that with the heads.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
If we build a stock appearing 318 2-barrel that makes 300 horsepower, it will set fire to the internet.
Yeah.
What I would do, Tony, is since David in his health, I'll act as the liaison between between David and you, and we'll get this, because he's not going to be up for a road trip coming to your place to pick an engine up, or you know what I'm saying. So I can handle that in logistics on my side.
Okay, like I said, you just tell me what needs to be provided, and I'll round up 100% of the parts.
Okay.
And then tell me whatever you want me to do. You want me to dress down the block, just clean up flash and stuff like that. Anything you want me to do, tell me what you want me to do, and then I'll pass.
Well, can I make a point here, Tony? It's based on what you've just said. Can we make this one of the things that a guy with not much money to spend on his hot rod has got, usually more of, his time, right? And he's building this engine because it's a passion, right? Nobody's in the hot rod game and don't like engines.
It's an experiment.
Can we make this cosmetically good 2-barrel? In other words, when this guy, he might only have a 2-barrel engine, but when he goes to the local car meet and opens the hood, they say, "Wow, what a nice looking engine!" Right?
Yeah.
So the deflashing the block and making things look real pretty is part of the game, because it's only time and a coat of paint.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll make it look the part.
Right?
We'll
Yeah,
make it as
we'll
stock
make it
as
pretty.
1971 is.
See, in my mind, the fantasy of this in my mind is that you would have this engine that looks just completely stock, right? And you have it in, let's say, a Valiant, right? And you go to a Mopar meet and you start calling out people with Hemi cars. You know what I'm saying? Because you can hurt more feelings with a 318 2-barrel than you can with anything else you can imagine.
Oh yeah.
So
Let me ask this: are you trying to keep it with manifolds?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's going to have cast iron manifolds.
Yes.
So we've got to do exhaust from the manifold face. The exhaust system is free, is it? We can
Yes,
pick.
the exhaust system is free.
Okay, that means that we very carefully select the mufflers and that based on flow and.
Like I said, in my mind, it would be like covering every single detail, like dressing down the veins on the water pump, and just go through this thing one end to the other, and just streamline and refine and whatnot, just to see what can be made out of the least package.
Yeah,
I think that would be fun.
Got to be the best bang for the buck possible.
Yes, it would take a ton of time. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that somebody would just bolt together, on a whim.
But this guy, the guys that are going to do this have got the passion for it.
Yeah.
And like I said, could you imagine you put this in like a 2,700-pound Valiant with a set of 391s in it and a quiet exhaust, and you go to one of these Mopar meets, you know what I mean? And you pop the hood, right? And it's just a big quiet single diameter exhaust. And you go to a Mopar meet and you pop the hood, and this little innocent looking 318, the little tiny 2-barrel sitting on top of it, and one little pipe. And you go up to a guy with a Hemi Cuda and tell him, "I got $500 says that you're staring at my taillights at the finish line there."
That would be hilarious.
It would be a blast. And I think in my mind, ultimately, that's like the goal. You know what I'm saying?
You could do this if you limited the race to 100 yards and you put in a low gear. You could cover that 100 yards really quick.
Well, 8th mile is the standard now.
Yeah.
If you stop and you think about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if the car is geared right, if it's light enough, you know what I mean? If it's set up correctly, it would run away and hide from most of the restored stock, Hemi cars, 6-pack cars, 340 cars. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, it would be so fun.
All right, so what do we got?
Let's do it. What we got?
I don't know. We've been ignoring our people, and I hate when we do that. Let's see. Dylan McCool. Yeah, you guys watch Dylan McCool?
I do.
Yeah, he's a good kid.
Yeah.
His video today featured a cop car 318 that had pursuit heads. They were 360 castings. Yeah, those engines came with a 360 intake manifold, the thermal quad, and like 7-to-1, like literally 7-to-1 compression. It would run on like hairspray. You know what I mean? Let's see. How long do you guys want to hang out here? So we're coming up on 2 hours.
Well,
What do you think?
I'm starting to lose my voice here, right? I've done altogether too much talking. I think I've done 20% of yours, Tony, and 30% of Andy's, right?
Okay, so Chuck Farley is saying the 2-barrel Rochester is actually a very tunable carb, great to learn on. Actually, to use them in certain dirt track classes. I will go one step further than that, Chuck. I will hit you with the ultimate Mopar trivia. That I don't. Listen, I tell you what. Go knock on what's his name? The Graveyard Cars guy. What's his name? Graveyard Cars.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Go knock on his door and ask him if he's ever heard of this, because I guarantee he hasn't. In 1971, only 1971, 318 engines with air conditioning came with that Rochester 2-barrel.
That is crazy.
It's
I
the
did not
only,
know that.
Yep, it's the only application in the entire range of small block Mopars, the big block, small block Mopars, that Rochester 2-barrel was used, and it's only 1971.
I wonder
only
why that is.
318, only with air conditioning.
Can we? Is it on the cards for us to use that carburetor?
Yes.
Is it too
Yes.
much of a rarity?
I actually have one sitting on the shelf at the shop specifically with that in mind, because I'd like to do a BBD, maximize the BBD, get the most flow possible out of it, and then I'd like to do the Rochester, because I know the Rochester right off the bat, the Rochester flows like an extra 75 CFM.
How much?
Yeah.
About 75 CFM.
More.
Yes. Yeah, the BBD is 285 and the Rochester is 360.
Yeah.
Definitely need that one.
You'll notice.
Oh, yeah, I know, you see that.
Yeah.
But the question is, if you take a BBD and you massage the BBD, it starts at 285, but what can you get flow-wise?
Well, typical 2-barrel, and I'm talking about typical, we should, and again, I'm being conservative here, we should be able to get that up to 400, maybe 425 CFM.
See, that's really interesting, right? That's a good piece, and that's a good match for an engine of 318 inches.
And it won't be a 10-minute job.
No. But how interesting is that?
Time will be a deal, right?
I think we
could mount it on the flow bench and
it's no problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, if we all team up on this, we could probably knock it out in about 2 months.
Yeah.
And really no money. I mean,
No.
Well,
it's going to take more than 2 months.
you think?
Yeah, it is.
All right, well, let's see how it goes. But if you guys are game, I'm game too. Just tell me what you need from me and consider it done.
Okay.
And I'm ready to start like tomorrow morning.
I can't make a start yet. I've got 14 commitments that I've still got to finish.
Yeah, we've got.
I'm struggling with them, right?
What's
happening here is probably Andy and I will do 1 cylinder, right? And then the rest of it we'll do between us. I'll do all the machining and all that.
Now knock it out.
We'll do the grinding. I can stand at the milling machine, right, or the seat and guide machine for quite a while, or rather be there, because I'll stand up, set up an operation, then sit down on my stool, right? But doing the grinding is difficult to sit down. You have to keep moving the chair.
Grinding cast iron is a lot different than grinding aluminum too.
Yeah,
I know.
I prefer grinding cast iron because so long as you've got the tools for it, you can shape it better because you can control your cut better. It takes longer, but the results are more pleasing.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, look, guys, I'm losing my voice here. Right? I don't know if you and Andy want to go on, and you're very welcome to, but I've got to go and get a drink here.
Oh, go ahead. Andy, it's up to you.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to sign off now. I've got to check my blood sugar and all that stuff, right? So what I want to say is thank you for all these people who've checked in with us here. And, you know, I recognize a lot of names and things are coming up faster than I can absorb them. So I haven't been able to get to answer every single question. And there's a bunch of good ones there, right?
We'll do this again soon, David.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Let's do this another time, right? Same bat time, same bat channel, right? But down the road.
David, listen. Listen to me. My channel is your channel, okay? Anything that I can do for you, anything that we can collectively do for you.
Tony, I appreciate that. And you know, here's the thing.
Oh, we appreciate you.
It doesn't surprise me that you've made that offer, right? Because that's who you are, right? And I think that when I read some of the criticisms, negative criticisms of your channel, I think these guys forget that just like me, you put your pants on the same way around. You're expressing a lot of what you do from experience, right? And if you're good, and I say this, guys who want to contradict Tony, please do it in such a manner that it's polite, because Tony has good manners back to us, right? So with that, I'm going to leave you guys, right? But anytime you want me on the program.
No, it's you. It's. I want you on the program anytime you want to be on the program. Andy and I talked about this because you're feeling better now. It says let's get him while he's feeling good.
Right, endless, right? Anytime you want my time, you got it. That's it.
All right, so let's plan on next Friday night. How's that sound?
Next Friday night. What are you?
Yeah, I think that'll be all right. I got to be careful. I've got some preparations for some operations coming up, right? But I think that's okay.
All right, just let me know. I'll put that time aside, David.
Right.
Next Friday is open for you.
We'll try and do it, right?
Okay.
Anyway, guys, don't forget, subscribe, like, spread it, let everybody know, encourage your friends, etc., to go to my channel.
Yes, go subscribe to his channel. And the next
really
time,
good stuff coming up.
Tune in next time when David tells me how long my 0 oil pressure 318 will run.
Did I tell you my Grumpy Jenkins story?
Did I tell you what I got? I've got like 0 weight synthetic oil in this thing. The oil pressure gauge doesn't even like budge when you start it. It shoots up to like 50 pounds, when it's running.
Yeah.
But anyway,
we've got a lot of tales to tell. We've been around long enough to have a lot of tales. Anyway,
that's a good thing.
Good night, David.
Night, fellas.
Thank you.
And any ladies, right? And I know we've got at least 1 or 2, right? So, and bye-bye to the little one. Is she still there?
Oh no, she's gone. I'm gonna go watch dog videos with her now.
Right, there you go.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Leave it to Andy, right? And I'll see all you guys next week. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. So Andy, what else? How do we want to wrap this up, bro?
However you want to do it.
You want to take a few questions, or?
Yeah, let's see what we got.
Let's see. Terry Littlejohn's got a Roots blown slant 6 in a Duster.
That is super cool.
It is. Hey, Charles Manson, what's going on? This is a long one. Let's go real quick. Sorry, slant 6 170 build. What would you guys insights into mile per gallon economy build stuff? I'm doing I have a hyper mile build in my head, but it's not time for it yet. I gotta wait for the prices to head back up, and everybody starts thinking about fuel economy, and then we're gonna get into that. But there's already one on deck. Okay. Let's see. Dakota saying, last live, David talked about tilting the bore a little, so maybe like 92 degrees. Can you all elaborate on that?
I don't know in what context.
Dakota, it wasn't talking about tilting the bore. It was talking about offsetting the crank.
Yeah, yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, the bore stays at 90, okay? But you're moving the crank over. And when you're moving the crank over, you're essentially doing the same thing as if you offset the piston pins. So if you're looking for the advantage of an offset pin or a reverse offset pin, but you've got a race, your pins are centered because it's a better situation for the piston to have the pin centered. You can offset the crankshaft, and that's what they do with the higher end engines. They don't offset the pin; they offset the crank.
Right.
Let's see. I just have a question for you. Fast staying, Andy, address the header issues and explain why it's not some BS like Brian Cabral keeps making up.
Oh, Lord. The header issue, well, Tony knows because I've sent him pictures. And
I posted the pictures on my video.
But basically, my truck is in header purgatory. I mean, this thing was supposed to have been done before the No Name Nationals. He's had a lot of things come up. And I'm not happy, I'm just being honest. I'm not happy with the amount of time or some of the things that's happened. And all of that will be covered in my videos whenever I do get the truck back, which should be sometime here soon. But it's a real deal. The header deal is a fiasco. Okay. That's a lesson to me.
Question for Andy. Did DV design the small block Chevy Pontiac NASCAR heads?
No.
Okay. Let's see. Nicholas R. So besides chopping the choke tower off and smoothing the hard edges around the top, where else could you touch up a 2-barrel carburetor to flow more? Years and years and years ago, like I was a teenager, maybe a little bit older, I learned a lot of Kevin Codd's carburetor tricks, and there's tremendous gains that can be made in just detailing certain parts inside of a carburetor. I mean, only just chamfering the bottom edge underneath the throttle blades increases flow. Texturing the bores increases flow. Tailoring this, just taking down the booster size, the external parts of it can increase flow. All of these things, when they're combined, can increase flow like a tremendous amount.
Slabbing the throttle shafts. There's all kinds of things that you can do.
Yep. Let's see. Andy, any regrets with the Hemi? Would you choose it again? Anything different in the build?
I would pick it again because it's what I actually wanted. The thing about that build, I wanted the aesthetics of the look of the original Boss 429.
Oh, you got it.
And so that's important to me. Just so happens the cylinder head was really good. Would I do anything different? Ask me that question after I drive it.
Jay Malone says, Kevin Codd lives a few blocks from me. Then do you know Mike Tarnowski, Mikey T? Because Mikey T, I used to hang around Mikey T's shop all the time, and this is where I learned all of this stuff from. I hope Mikey's doing well. I haven't talked to him probably in almost 30 years. Let's see.
I've got a tough road to hoe with mixed up Balso.
Yeah,
because I'm like you, man. I will chase a rabbit down a hole so far. I want to see how drivable I can make two Dominators. Who in their right mind does that?
Nobody.
Thank you. I'm sick.
I got that Dominator. I'm not going to use it. I got that Dominator body I'm going to send you. It's just sitting at the shop. It's an old one,
Yeah.
Let's see. Ben went to drill holes and everything to save weight. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Daniel Riffle wants to know if you have an email address for questions he might have.
Yes, you can forward it to tunnelram393@gmail. It's actually on my channel. And if it's something related to Vizard, what I've started trying to do is forward him all of those emails.
Right. As far as me, I have an email address, but we don't use it. Don't even bother sending it. We do lives every Sunday night. If you've got a question or anything like that, come in on a Sunday night, and we try to answer as many questions as possible. Let's see. Jay Malone says he doesn't know Mikey. Kevin is doing fine. It's a cool Chevy Vega right now. Awesome. Riff Raff Rackus. It's cool, man. What is the advantages of slotted spring main bearing caps? I've never heard of that.
I don't know what he's referring to.
I don't either. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that, Riff Raff? South Jersey Jim, UTG or Andy, ever set up a V8 with Webers? If so, how'd they work? I never have.
Well, I know that DV has done a lot of work with Weber, and he puts a lot of time into those carburetors, but the results he gets out of them is phenomenal. That's out of my wheelhouse.
Okay, I mean, I've worked on Webers, but I've never, quote, set one up, and definitely not on a V8.
Yeah.
That's just one of those oddities. When you're a mechanic, just one of those oddities that'll occasionally drift into your life. Something with Webers, and that's
the funny part. I do have a Weber story. The last setup that we had in here was for a small block Ford, and it was going on a Cobra kit car, I think it was. David wound up having to spend more time on fixing the screwed up manifold than the carburetors, because the port entry from the transition between the carb and to the runner was just completely horrible.
Gabriel DeMarco, Tony and Andy. So the size of carb, if I multiply the cubic inches by 2, would it get me in the ballpark? Yes, that's my formula. It's just a random formula, but I figure that's the starting point. Double the cubic inches, and that's the smallest carburetor you need on that engine. Would I divide that figure by 2 if running dual carbs, or would each carb be that size? Andy.
Okay, what you need to understand is when you put an extra carburetor on the engine, the pressure drop of that carburetor is now different. So basically, it is not going to flow the same amount of air as it would with a single carb. So even though you put 2 750s on there, you may see 600 CFM thereabouts going through each one. If that, it's probably less than that. So, just because you have 2 750s doesn't mean that it's, 1500 CFM, because it's not.
Okay. Well, remember, anytime you increase, any time that you increase, let's say, the surface area that any given fluid is exposed to, and air is a fluid, okay? You're increasing drag, and so therefore decreasing flow. So, like then the example of that is if you have, let's say you have a tube, right, and it's a ½ inch inside diameter, and you say, well, I want to double this up, so I'm going to run 2 fuel lines. Let's use a fuel line.
Yeah.
You've got a fuel line. It's a ½ inch inside diameter, and you say, no, I'm going to double this up. I'm going to use 2 ½ inch lines, and that would be the same as a 1 inch line, but it's not.
It's not.
There's so much loss through the extra, and that so you're in that example of the 2 ½ inch lines. It's the same as having a ½ inch line and adding maybe another 1/8, because there's that much drag as it goes through. That's why a lot of like, for instance, Chrysler performance cars, they use a big diameter single exhaust on a couple of models, like the 273 Power Pack motors. Because that big diameter single exhaust flows more than the slightly smaller dual exhaust.
That's exactly right.
A lot of people don't realize, they right away, I'm going to throw dual exhaust on the car and go faster. No, you may not be at all. You know, just go a size up. You know, if you instead of running 2.5 inch, run 2 3/4 inch, and it's almost the same as running a pair of 2-inch tools.
That's exactly right.
And heat loss.
Yeah.
You know, people don't realize too. A dual exhaust loses more heat than a single exhaust does. And heat is the lubricant of exhaust.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what the question was, or if we answered.
We were talking about, we covered it. You know, and basically, it depends on how much power that you're trying to make with that formula. For like your average street deal, that is a killer formula. But when you're talking race engines, it doesn't necessarily apply.
Wayne, what about a single quad on a tunnel ram? The carburetor doesn't care what style manifold it is.
That's
a plenum
right.
is a plenum.
That tunnel ram is basically a big single plane at that point.
The carburetor does care somewhat whether it's a single or a dual plane manifold, and really only if there's a divider, like a very distinct divider. Yeah. The carburetor does care about that, and generally a spacer, a 1-inch spacer, kind of eliminates.
Well, he's talking about single quad on a tunnel ram.
Yeah, well, he's saying sizing doesn't make a difference. And
I would put the same size carburetor that you would not run on a single plane.
But on a tunnel ram, you got to realize that the problem with doing a single quad on a tunnel ram is that your outer cylinders, right? Your outer cylinders are always going to be starved of the heavier mixture.
Bingo.
You're always going to run lean.
I have never seen an as-cast tunnel ram single 4-barrel make more power than a dual carb top. Now, unless you have a special sheet metal manifold that's meant for like class racing, and you look at the top of those manifolds compared to your regular cast manifold, it's a totally different animal.
So if you go back, Andy, if you go back to the AHRA, American Hot Rod Association, GT classes from 1969, 70, 71, okay?
Single 4-barrel class.
Single 2-barrel.
Yeah.
They had single 4-barrel and single 2-barrel classes.
Yeah.
And there were combinations out there. There was a lot of really weird combinations, but they ran single 4-barrels on tunnel. Basically, it was like NHRA modified, except that it was they called it GT, and they had different rules as far as carburation goes. Modified didn't have carburation rules. GT classes did have carburation rules.
Right.
So let's say you ran a 4-barrel class, you ran a 2-barrel class. You would have like a 396 Chevy with a 2-barrel on a tunnel ram, and it would have this huge plenum, like the biggest. The plenum was as big as the rest of the fucking engine, and that was only so that those end
That's exactly
runners
right.
had a chance at some of what was being coming out of the bottom of the carburetor with the velocity that comes through.
That's exactly right.
Let's see. Michael Gunner and Hinkle, Tony, have you ever read Bill Jenkins, The Chevrolet Racing Engine? The tunnel ram information and carburetor information is nuts. Must read for your small block Chevy guy. I read that book several times when I was younger, but the things that it had did not apply to what I was working with at the time, and so I didn't absorb a lot of it. Andy, on the other hand, could probably quote you every bit of information from the tunnel ram part of that.
I really have. I mean, you know, you go back to Grumpy's trick of restricting the idle feed restriction, you know, with a little piece of wire. That's a Grumpy deal. You know what I'm saying? That's a Grumpy trick. And
you know, the funny thing is, if you did a video on that, you'd have 100 people calling you a hack.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, you know, that's how you got around it back then.
Right. Sand Mountain Ballistics. What's happening, man? How are you? I'm running a Mickey Thompson cross-rim intake with two 600 CFM Edelbrocks. I was wondering what the best way to figure out what jets and metering rods would work best.
You're going to have to look at your plugs and see what the engine's actually telling you.
What about for a starting point? Give them a starting point.
Well, if it were me, I would start with the stock calibration of the carburetor and work from there. Because on a cross rim, they're not all created equal. Distribution issues. So you're better off just starting with out-of-box carburetor and fine-tuning until you find a happy medium. And it will probably take you some time to do.
Oh, I have something that might help you. Okay, Edelbrock offers 500 CFM AFBs that are intended for multiple carb use. Right? They're calibrated differently than the standard 6. I know. Forget about the 100 CFM difference. It makes no difference in this situation. Yeah. Find out. Do your homework and find out what springs and drop rods and jets are in those 500 CFM carbs. There's two versions of it. There's a 500 CFM that's supposed to be single 4-barrel, and then they have a 500 CFM for dual quads. So find out what the calibrations are on that 500 CFM dual quad Edelbrock carburetor and transfer those to yours, and that will put you like really close.
In the ballpark, you will be close.
Yeah. I think if you just ran 2 AFBs out of the box, yeah, and especially if
we don't know what kind of motor he's got it on. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's true. That's true.
You know, and from my experience, every time you put multiple carbs on, you have to trim a ton of fuel from it to make it happy.
Well, that kind of goes for running any oversized carburetor.
Right.
So a lot of people don't really get that. You know, like you throw if your formula says you're supposed to have 600 CFM, but you want to throw an 850 on it, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the 850 will work, but you got to take actual fuel away from it. You got to jet the thing down, yeah, and you'll get the result you're looking for.
Right. And I actually did a lot of carb testing on that little mod motor, man, and it's crazy. You know, 304 cubic inches. You would think that 650 would work really well. We made the best times at the track with a 950 HP carburetor, but I had to trim a ton of fuel out of the idle feed restrictions so that it wouldn't kill the plugs just pulling around the pits.
Right. On a bottle rocket, I've got an 850 on that thing.
Yeah.
It wants more. It would take more. The thing I'm working on now is just without the bottle. It has a bit of a stumble. I can't flat foot it. I got to do like this.
You got to roll into it.
I got to roll into it. If I flat foot it, it stumbles. So I don't know what's up with that yet. I don't really care. You know, at this point, I'll dig into that further. But you could tell when the motor is up and running. You know, she's in that 6,000 RPM range. It'll take more. I know she would take that. I know if I threw a 950 on there, she would eat it up.
You know, and a lot of it has to do with having the right booster to atomize the fuel the right way. You know, when you have a really big carburetor, you better have a good booster in there to atomize that fuel instead of it being just like a hose pipe pouring the fuel down in there.
Right, and Andy is much more versed in that than I am.
Yeah.
Much better versed in booster design and everything. That's something I want to play with, and that's something I got to pick his brain. And as I learned from Andy, I'm going to pass it on to you guys.
See, the cool thing about me and David is I am the average hot rodder, right? Who's just happened to have an amazing teacher over the years. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And he's made me look at things differently than I would have ever looked at them before, because a lot of times I had to relearn what I thought was right. You know, I knew I had my own accepted truths. Well, I found out that my truth wasn't actual truth.
New Guy's Garage. Could you use a vacuum gauge to see if wide open throttle, the carburetor is a restriction? Yes.
Yes.
But now listen, even the smallest carburetor you put in, so let's say you got a 350 cubic inch engine and you have a 2-barrel carburetor on it. You slam it, you're going to zero, right? That's going to be only effective at higher RPM. So it's only when you start seeing a restriction at 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 RPM, that's when that becomes a valuable thing. But if you just put a vacuum gauge on your engine, even with a tiny carburetor on it, right, and you flat foot it, that gauge is going to zero. So it's not really going to tell you anything. So that's going to be a static, or I should say, it's going to be a dynamic measurement that's taken higher on in the RPM range.
Yeah. You know, one thing I'll tell you what I've got to deal with Casper. You know, and this would make a really good video. And this is where dynos don't always tell the truth. What is optimum jetting on the dyno is not going to be the optimum jetting going down the track in a dynamic situation. Does that make sense?
Yes. That goes back to that whole argument with people accuse me of saying dynos don't work. No, I never said dynos don't work. Dynos will give you, depending on the type of dyno that it is. If it's a stationary brake, where I should say, if it's a brake style that the engine is led up. So let's say you program the dyno so that you're going to go wide open throttle, and the dyno is going to let the motor accelerate at, let's say, 300 RPM a second. That's you're going to get a completely different result than an inertia type dyno where the motor is run into the dyno, and now the dyno is taking the full force of the motor. So if the dyno leads the motor, you're going to get a different result than if the motor leads the dyno. And that was my problem with the way, like when Richard Holdner tested the offset piston thing.
Right.
They're testing it on a dyno that's leading the engine, so you don't get the effect of the engine running into the dyno. Or basically, you're not getting the acceleration rate that the engine is going to provide against the load. The acceleration rate on his dyno is dictated by the dyno itself. So it's almost like his dyno is only good to take readings. And I'm not singling out Richard. I'm not talking bad about him or his methods or anything like that. What I'm saying is that type of dyno is good for taking snapshots. The engine makes this here, this here, this here, this here, this here, this here, and that becomes the chart. As opposed to the engine does this.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
That's exactly right.
I know it's exactly right, but tell that to the trolls.
Well, the dyno takes, you got 300 feet per second, or you can set it at 600 feet per second, and it takes incremental snapshots, just like Tony said, and then it's like playing connect the dots to make that graph, and if you listen to an engine being loaded, you can actually hear the dyno releasing it through each stage.
Right.
Depending on how you set it up. But, like there's certain things that you really can't test on a dyno. You can see gains like carb spacers. That is the perfect example.
Yeah, you can see that, but you'll never see shooters.
Well, the thing about it is, like, if you noticed in my dyno test, we put 2 1-inch spacers underneath there. I know without a shadow of a doubt going down the track that would not work because the engine has to be able to recover from the shift when you shift gears. And when you have carb spacers that tall, it makes it where the engine can't recover. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so you may find a spacer combination on the dyno that makes killer power, and then take it to the track and find out that it's not going to run like you've seen on the dyno.
Franco is saying the world's best dyno is 1,320 feet long. He's absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's the only one that counts.
Basically, the dyno is the best tool that we have devised to kind of emulate that. The drag strip is the ultimate dyno. And we've tried to create a device that's got deficiencies to try to replicate that, if that makes sense.
Okay. Michael Garnerman, I'm glad you asked this question, Michael. Tony, have you ever thought about building an NHRA stock eliminator car? Bottle Rocket is an NHRA stock eliminator car with liberties taken in the induction system and the bottle. Other than that, it's a textbook. The car itself is a textbook NHRA stock eliminator car. And it works like one. It works like one.
Yeah.
As far as other experiences, I had the IHRA iPure stock record with a Mustang back in 1987, and I had run. I know this sounds like like science fiction, but I did it. Okay, I crushed it by a half second. I ran 1343 at 101 miles an hour with a bone stock 1987 Mustang. That just this on Gatorbacks.
Yes,
On Gatorbacks. I got pictures of that car pulling the left front wheel on Gatorbacks. So yeah, I've my fantasy car has always been one of a U or a V stock car in its station wagon with the 273. I love those cars. Even when I was running nitro cars, if I was in an NHRA event, and they were running stock eliminator, I would always like try to keep an eye out, because anytime they'd run those U or V stock cars, I drop what I'm doing. I run to the fence, I watch them run, and then I go back and work on the nitro car.
You know, I have much respect for those guys.
It's pure science, it's pure voodoo, and it takes so
It
much
is.
effort.
And they have refined every aspect of the car.
Every aspect of it. I was talking with one. So you talk about little things that stock eliminator guys do, right? I had one guy. He had the record. He had at the time, and I don't remember what the numbers were. And I'm not going to say who it was because this is like a secret. Okay. He ran 2 fuel pressure regulators. Okay. He had fuel pressure regulator mounted on the fender well.
Okay.
And then he had a second fuel pressure regulator mounted right outside the carburetor.
Yeah.
And he ran a huge fuel pump. Why?
I don't know.
Because the fuel going through the restriction in the regulator
Yeah.
caused the fuel to expand, which chilled the fuel, which got more through the jets.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So it's like little stuff like that. You know, you open a, like you look at what some of these stock eliminator guys do, and you say, "What the hell is that?" And then this guy had listen to this one. He had a secret air cleaner, right? So he ran an air cleaner assembly on his car, okay? And he had 2 of them. This is cheating. Okay? He had 2 of them. They were identical, right? They even had like the same stickers on them. So like if you put these 2 air cleaners on the ground next to each other, they were identical. Okay.
Right.
One of them had a ball that hung from the center of it, a tapered shaped ball. Ball is the wrong word.
Yeah.
It was like a teardrop shaped thing.
From the lid.
From the lid.
Yeah.
Then when you put this thing over the top of the carburetor, that teardrop shape went, the very tip of it went into the carburetor.
Yeah.
It was a Stromberg 2-barrel, because the 65, 6060 is a Stromberg 2-barrel in a 273. And he said that was good for like 8 horsepower.
Yeah. And I can believe that. I mean, you know, you're trying to straighten the airflow before it goes into the carburetor, you know, and you're looking, like I said, those guys have those cars down to a science. And if it's on that car, there's a reason for it being there.
Charles Manson, Tony, let me repeat a question. How much power do you think Bottle Rocket is making without spraying? I don't know. I honestly don't know, only because I haven't really gone with the car and got good mile an hour readings. Like for instance, the last time we ran the car, and I can't do anything with the mile an hour reading I got because it was vibrating. I got a little too aggressive with the pinions, the pinion angle of the thing, because you run the stick, right? Yeah. So I says, well, this thing's gonna like jam up, right? So it's like, so it's instead of having like 3 degrees, I'm at like 5.5, almost 6 degrees. Okay, which is one of the reasons. If you remember watching the car launch when it was, because that pinion angle was severe, and I let off, and I overshot it. I went too far. And there is the side effect of that is that I got a drive shaft vibration. Anything above 75, 80 miles an hour, it starts vibrating real bad. So I haven't fixed that yet. So I haven't run the car through the lights under power. So I don't have a mile an hour number to go by to make a horsepower calculation. Yeah. So
and plus, I really haven't ran it much on motor.
No. And the last time we took it out, so what happened was, it was a spur of the moment thing. And I was like, oh, I'll just get my bottle filled, on the way to track. Well, the place that I was going to get it filled went out of business, Tennessee Speed Sport. So in the bottle, I had like, literally, there was nothing there. There's barely anything on the gauge. You cracked the bottle open and it was like 200 pounds, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I says, fine, I'll just launch with it and see what happens. So that's what we did. We went out, launched it in second gear, launched the car in second gear because I wanted to work the converter and see what that was going to do. And it started to nose over, I'm going to say about 300 feet out.
Yeah.
And I let off the button and I ran it through to about 50 feet shy of the lights. And that's where I ran a 770 doing that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, the car's got it in it. The car's got it in it. I just need to refine it and stop being
It does.
lazy.
It really does. I've seen the car in person. I know what it's capable of, and I'm really excited to see what it does with the automatic, because now you can just throw the beans to it and let it eat.
That was a mistake I made, man. Trying to make that car work with a stick was just wrong. It was dumb. I was just being stubborn. It was a bad idea. So we're on the right track now. The car came around just amazing. Yeah. So I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I think our race is going to be good.
I can't wait. It's going to happen. To all the naysayers, it's going to happen.
Zappa TX. What rear does Tony have in that? It's an 8 3/4 or 456 and a spool. Right? Believe it or not, I actually sprung for a spool in that car because I wanted it. Weight is everything to me with this car. So I'm reducing parasitic losses is everything with this car. So I went with a spool because it's about 4 pounds lighter than the short, 5 pounds lighter than the short grip. And I run ATF in the back, in the rear. And this is like no exaggeration. I kid you not. Okay. Jack the back of the car off the ground with the drive shaft in it, okay? Jack the car off the back of the ground. Take your pinky, put your pinky on the tire. Go like this. And the tire just rolls along. Both tires will just roll along like that. And when you stop doing this, they keep going.
Yeah.
I've got a drive on that has like almost zero parasitic loss.
That's what you want.
Took a lot to get it like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Let's see. I'm looking for. Oh geez, I'm starting to glaze over. You ever get to that point where it's just like
I do.
I see words, but I can't read them.
Yeah.
Night Wrencher saying, "Hey, Andy."
Hey, Night Wrencher. He's a pretty cool dude. He drove all the way from California to the No Name Nationals.
Did he really?
He sure did.
That's dedication for you.
Flat towing his truck.
He flat towed from California to Missouri.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let's see. Speaking of welding spider gears from Wednesday night made me wonder, would you trust a Harbor Freight flux core welder fat or stick to oxyacetylene? Yeah, I've welded them with the flux core. It's fine. It's fine. But there's a ton of BBs. You know, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay. Yeah. If you're going to do it with a flux core welder, you're going to spend like 2 hours afterwards with it with like a sharpened, like small chisel going inside the rear end and knocking off all the thousands of BBs. So it can be done, but don't do it. Don't do it. Yes, I mean, that's dedication. Flat towing from Cal. That's like a 4,000 mile round trip.
Oh yeah.
Jesus, you wear out the tires on the car. Wait, Tony, for the love of God, answer David's question. Jeez, who's David? Let me go back. David. Charles Manson, I asked him like 10 times, I guess. Okay, let me go back. David. Guys, you have to understand something. If I'm talking to Andy and I'm looking at him, right?
Yeah.
Andy's here. Okay. I can't see the questions. I have to actually stop and look over here to see the questions. So I'm scrolling back to find David's question, which he evidently asked 1,000 times.
I missed it too.
I don't see it. I mean, I've gone back to 9:23, which is 13 minutes ago, and I still don't see a question. I am scrolling back up. It says, I guess you like to skip the tech questions. This whole thing was about tech questions. Which better, high lobe lift versus high rocker ratio? Different, it's apples and oranges.
The thing about it is, in most production engines, you're dealing with a cam tunnel that is limited in how big of a lobe that you can put in there. Okay, so people will end up going to the high rocker ratios to try to get the additional lift. You know, DB, and I haven't ever really messed with stuff like that because most of my stuff is just street strip type deals. But it's better to have a high lift lobe if you've got a cam tunnel that can. That's why you see 55 millimeter cam tunnels, 60 millimeter cam tunnels. And if you look at like a pro stock engine of today, you're talking about like a 3-inch cam tunnel almost, so that they can get a physically larger lobe on there, and it ends up having better valve train dynamics than the rocker ratio deal. Is that, I mean?
Well, I would add to that. Because, all right, if the only thing that's important to you is the actual lift, right? Then flip a coin, okay? Because the higher lobe lift, or the taller nose on the cam, or the higher rocker ratio is going to net you the same distance of valve opening. So it's one or the other. If and only if lift is the only thing you're going for. But the ramp can be completely different on a higher lift cam. And one of the reasons one of the reasons why severe horsepower engines like pro stockers and whatnot, right, go for a super tall lift is not for the sake of the lift itself, but for the additional profile that's built into the lobe.
Yeah, you have a lot more stable profile of a lobe.
You end up with more active duration with a taller lobe and a more rounded ramp than you will with just. So that's David. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
it's two different things. If you're only looking for lift, then 6 of one, half a dozen of another. But if you're looking for an actual active profile, right? If you're looking to extend a duration without actually extending duration, does that make any sense? The taller lobe will give you a ramp that you can bring like
be
this. Be more gradual and net you more effective duration.
And it'll be more stable and make more power.
David, is that good? Did I skip your fucking question? I'm sorry. James McClaney, McAnally is saying, hell, I used to say, why did you not put a bigger cam in it? The small cam tunnel does explain that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's basically just when you're dealing with OE type engine builds. You know, when you start doing aftermarket, then you have more leeway of what you can do.
Okay, I'm scrolling through the questions here. Havoc, Tony, you're running a 318 versus Casper, which is what, a big block? That doesn't hardly sound fair. It's more than a big block, it's the mixed up boss. It's a crazy thing that him and David concocted. It's crazy. It's huge. It's got all kinds of carburetors all over the top of it. It's got valve covers that are bigger than my kitchen. Okay, it's giant, and I have this silly little 318.
But you have the great equalizer.
Weight
And nitrous.
and nitrous, right? So that's what it's all about. Okay, it comes down to is primitive weight and nitrous any match for a full size high tech combination? And I think honestly think it's I'll tell you what, you have far more track time under your belt than I do in recent years. Like at one point in my life, I lived at the track. So you're going to cut a better light for sure. You're going to read the surface better than I will for sure. But I think it's going to be a good race. I think
power to weight ratio is everything. And just because you make the power, you've got to get that power to the ground. You know what I'm saying? Right.
And that's why typically, you'll go for like a 2 out of 3 or right. But I practice runs, and that's why when I called Andy out with this, I specified 1 run off the trailer.
Yeah, because we're both equal at that point.
Right. And I have the advantage because Andy's got more power. So there's more chance of Andy making a mistake and spinning the tires than me, only by virtue of the fact that he's got a bunch more power than I do. So by taking the cars off the trailer, it gives me the advantage in that he's got more power and is more likely to have to. So it's all street racing shit.
Yeah, it's fun.
Right. Okay. UT and Andy, gear drives, worth it? Are they ultimately detrimental because of transfer of harmonics? Yes, I feel so.
Yep.
Yes, there's a ton of harmonics in the valve train, a ton of it. Which is why like super stockers and stuff went to belt drives eons ago.
Bingo.
And the more radical it came, and especially roller cams, because the roller cam, the cam wants to chatter at like ridiculous, right? So isolating the crankshaft from the camshaft with a belt or even a chain, and a loose chain at that. You don't want a chain it's like that. You want to set your cam timing, taking some slop into consideration, because the looser the chain, the less transfer of harmonics there are, the more accurate spark timing you're going to get, which is why higher end builds went to crank triggers and shit. Eons ago, the same time they went to belt drives and whatnot, they went to crank triggers, because that harmonics, if you're dealing with a street engine with a distributor, those harmonics through the cam play havoc with the distributor.
Absolutely.
Okay. Dave, we got no problem, man. I'm sorry I missed it so many times.
I'm sorry I didn't see it too.
Like I said, you have to understand the dynamic of what we're doing right now, because I'm looking at the camera, looking at the screen, so I could see Andy, and to see questions, I got to look all the way here. This is how I have to be to read questions. So if they get by, I'm sorry. Okay. Dakota. Okay. My 455 keeps gas fouling plugs. Chuck Frawley, I'm going to answer. I'm going to go back to that in 1 second. My 455 keeps gas fouling plugs. Lunati Voodoo 227, 233 at 50, 110 LSA. Do I need to do some fish tank parts swapping? Probably. It's only getting to about 140 degrees. Yes, that could definitely be part of your problem.
Yeah, and that's not a very big cam in a 455.
No.
Makes me wonder if he's got some sort of other issue with the car.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking ignition.
Could be.
I'm thinking, Dakota, you don't have enough initial timing in that. You're probably okay. So if you're timing it to total, let's say you're timing it to 34 degrees total, and you're using the stock curve that's in the distributor, you're probably only seeing about 8 or 10 degrees before top dead center when you set it for that total, and that will give you a deal where it's gonna gas foul. Because in order to get the idle RPM up, you're going to have to open the throttle, which exposes the transfer slot, makes the thing go fat. So what you want to do in your situation is shorten up the curve, right? You want to curve the distributor and to limit it to only about 10 degrees, right? So this way, because the only reason you need curve in a distributor is just so you can start it easily. I lock out my distributors as soon as I build a hot rod. I just lock out the distributor. Curves are for people who care about starting cars. I don't care about starting a car. So I know that what I got to do is I've either got to spin the motor up and then kick the ignition on, or if it's a key operated ignition, pump the gas 3 or 4 times, hold the throttle about a quarter of the way open, turn the key, it'll start just like that. And if it doesn't,
It'll light right off.
Pump the gas 2, 3 more times, hold it a quarter way down, crank it, light right off. So that's starting it without a curve. But take your distributor out, limit the curve to about 10 or 15 degrees, set it for 34 total, and you want about 20 initial, and then you'll be able to close the throttle blades down, and that'll clean you up downstairs. Did I say that right, Andy?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. Let's see. Chuck Foley saying gear drives were designed for offshore power bursts or vibrations from the hole slamming into the water can snap a chain. No, gear drives were actually designed because of nitro cars, because of the exhaust pressures, or the load on the exhaust side of the valve train on a nitro car will snap a chain. Okay, because when you're on a nitro motor, you're opening up into an active pressure pulse. Like on a gasoline engine, alcohol engine, even a nitrous engine, it's the main pressure pulse is used up before the exhaust valve starts to open. On a nitro motor, it's actually you're opening the valve into active combustion. So the exhaust valve has to fight the same pressures that are pushing the piston down. So wrap your head around that, and you can imagine what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Because of that, a nitro motor will snap a chain. Like it's nothing, and that's where the gear drives originally came from. That was 1960, 1959, 1960 is when they first started coming into use. Okay. Let's see. Do you have to go, Andy?
No.
All right. Well, we'll hang out for another few minutes. We're coming up on 3 hours.
There was a question about CAM, the 128 formula, and running a vacuum pump.
I missed it.
Who is it? Scarlett, the 4-eyed CUDA.
Scarlett the 4-eyed CUDA. Okay. Andy, with the 128 formula, if the math works out to a 104 LS8, do you need to install a vacuum pump? Good question.
What people need to understand is if you're really worried about the idle quality and all of that, then you need to pick smaller loads. You know, that is the whole key to it, and being honest about the overlap that what you need. If you look at my video, there's a chart that I put up about the overlap, about different things that David has come up with, you know, towing, street performance, street strip, race, full race. You know what I'm saying? And you've got to be honest about your intentions with that. And if you, it's better to have the camshaft on the right LSA and use a smaller lobe than use bigger lobes on a wider LSA.
And also remember that LSA, the effect of LSA is going to be different. It's going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer because they use different ramp styles. They use different ramp profiles. So a cam that uses a very aggressive ramp is going to give you, even though mathematically the number is still going to be 104, 106, whatever it happens to be, it's going to have a different effect.
Yeah.
Ramp profile has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and like what David was talking about, the ability to have a cam ground on a core to a 104 or 103, say on a big block, that is an indication that you need to put bigger valves in it because it will like a slightly wider LSA.
But what an idle you get out of something like that, right? That's what you, 103, 105, that's what you each cylinder go, bink, 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 bink.
But to be honest with you, it's not quite like it. It sounds like a regular deal. I mean,
Really?
yeah, it's not.
106 is as far as I've ever.
Yeah, and I'll give you some one. The Engine Masters competition, Kazi was running 98 LSAs. Yes, sir.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the RPM range? What were the numbers?
That was the contest was average power, up to like 6,000 RPMs, and it was based off of the cubic inch of the engine. You see what I'm saying? So what he was trying to do is make that engine have as much torque as it possibly could so that it would score good. And I was talking with Greg Brown. He actually worked at Kazi's for 13 years before he started doing his own thing and making my cylinder heads. And he said that Kazi, he has a whole shop working for him, but yet he spends an entire year on the dyno. Just when those competitions were taking place, he would literally spend 100% of his time on the dyno trying different things.
This goes into a whole nother thing, but I think it's important that it's said, okay? When you take an example like that, right, where you're dealing with radical concepts, and you look at it and say, he won this contest and made X amount of power and just turned, everything, turned the universe upside down, and this is what he did. People will right away say, oh, okay, I'll just do that. I'll just spec mine that way.
No.
And they don't get it. They don't understand. There was when he came up when he spec'd that cam, okay, he was taking things into consideration the average person can't even spell, doesn't even know he exists, right? And so that particular grind in that particular engine designed for that particular combination and that particular competition, and so it worked, and it worked like gangbusters. And you see, the world of hot rodding is filled with examples like that, where Joe Blow will do this, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, he 3,000 horsepower NA, and he's running mozzarella, and so I'm going to do that too. It don't work. It don't work. These guys are so brilliant. They're so far advanced. They're so next level. These guys they're not even fucking humans, for Christ's sake. These are aliens that are doing this shit. And if you try to copy what they do, you will die. Okay?
A miserable death.
Right. So just to clarify that, and that's always been my gripe with the industry, man, because they leave out that part of the equation. They'll say, well, this person does this person does that, and they just set it out there for people to consume, and these people say, oh, that'll work for me. I could do that. No, your shit will never actually pull out of the driveway under its own power. So, but I know I'm going off on a rant. I'm going off on a topic.
Well, like DB's 128 formula, like I said, that's the average hot rodder's guide. So, like, I can tell you, because I've been with him doing all of the dyno tests on this stuff, if you have a small block Chevy, a 350, 355, it's going to want a 108. If you increase that to 383, it's going to want a 106. We've proved it time and time again. And the same thing can be applied to Chryslers. Ford, you would actually use a 127 instead of 128 because of how the air enters the combustion chamber differently, because it's not Siamese ports like a Chevrolet or a small block Chrysler or big block Chrysler. You know what I'm saying? And so the whole idea is, like, if I can get you on this path, it just helps you because you don't have a dyno, you don't have access to one, and you want the right cam at the right time. And it's about being practical, you know, and it's based off of 10.5 to 1 compression. You know, if you go in more compression, say 11.5, you're going to want about 1 degree wider. And if you're going, say, 9 to 1 compression from the 10.5, you're going to be wanting 1 degree tighter. You know, I can make it pretty generalized when I'm talking about it, you know. Like a 340 Chrysler, 202 valves, same as a small block Chevy, 202 valves, 10 cubic inches different. It's going to want probably a 109 to 108, probably 108.5. It'll probably split it because it's smaller and it's got more valve size per cubic inch than the 350 does, by 10 cubic inches.
No, but also you got now. Remember now, you only going to say this because you use the example of the 340 Mopar, and the 340 Mopar with the X head and the 202 intake is fine on a 340 block, which has got a 4-inch plus 40 bore, and that 4-inch plus 40 bore, that 202 size and the 4-inch plus 40 bore are the exact relationship for maximum flow through that valve. Now you take that same fucking 202 valve head and you stick it on a 360 block or even most of 318 block. And yes, the valve clears, but the bore isn't 4-inch plus 40 inches wide, so it shrouds, and you actually end up with less flow and less and worse cylinder filling, worse cylinder distribution than you do with a 188, a 360 valve.
Right.
And you run into the same situation when you run a 360 head on a 318 because the 1.88 valve comes right to the end.
Yeah.
It's just, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, well, I put 360 head, I put 340 heads on it. You know, 340s work great. People will take that 340 head, put it on the 318, expecting that it's going to fucking like magic. And no, you hurt the motor. You know, you actually hurt the valve. You would have been better off with the smaller valve and a proper cam than the bigger valve. And
yeah. And two, the 340 combustion chambers have a lot of deshrouding around the valve. It's actually machined from Chrysler.
Yep. Terry Littlejohn, is the LSA formula the same for an inline 6? Yeah. It's each individual cylinder.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how many or where they're pointing or anything like that. LSA is, but it does, the exhaust is going to have an effect.
Yeah, it would be slightly different. You'd have to talk to David about that because if you put it in his formula or his program, it can calculate it. But the 128, it's probably going to be about, if you probably use like a 125 number or 120, probably 126. 125 to 126 would be more close to right, but I'd have to ask him about it.
Yeah, if you go into the end of the rainbow, okay, in terms of like science, then I can tell you right off the bat, there are going to be dynamic differences based on the exhaust. Like for instance, if you're running a 6-into-1 exhaust or a 3-into-2 exhaust, you're going to have a different pull, a different set of characteristics than you will with a 4-into-1 typical of a V8 engine. You know, you got two sets of 4-into-1s. So that will ultimately have effect on the entire intake tract, the entire like from the top of the carburetor, from the air horn all the way to the end of the exhaust, makes a difference. But Terry, you run a supercharged engine, and so you run into a whole entirely different set of dynamics that maybe we get David to talk about next time.
Yeah.
We're on there.
There's a lot of people, but you know, vast majority of people are still NA. You know, only supercharging and turbos, man, is coming on like gangbusters of.
Everything is a power header anymore.
Yeah,
the whole world revolves around
nobody
power
builds NA motors anymore.
Right.
You know, because it's being a lost art, to be honest with you, unless you're in the upper echelons of racing, where you're racing a particular class that calls for that.
Well, things have evolved too. I'll tell you where the power header thing really became essential, right? And that's when the whole drag and drive concept came about.
Yeah.
Okay. Because building a 9 or a 10-second streetcar it normally aspirated, you can do it. There's no question you can do it. It's easy, but it's not drivable. You can't take this thing out on a highway and go 1,000 miles and then go make laps. No, it's dead. By the time it's dead, 50 miles down the road, it's dead. Okay,
you done killed the valve springs. You done killed everything.
You killed everything, right? So with the popularity and of the drag and drive thing and how that filtered through the hot rod culture to run an effective drag and drive in any of the faster classes.
And you gotta have turbos.
Yeah, it cannot be done without a Carburetor.
Yeah.
Because then you've got your 323 gears and you've got your big diameter tire and you can loaf it and a tight converter and you can loaf it down the highway and make, and it run like a regular car. And then when you need it to lay down 900, 1,000 horsepower, there it is.
So the thing about it is, Tony, we're living in a time where making the horsepower is not the problem.
Right.
Together is the problem.
Yeah, this is true.
Because you can take any engine platform out there and make tons of power with a lot of boost. It's just making it live.
Some of us prefer the simplicity of NA. Right, me too. Right, I like. I can explain it to you. It's not you. I have to explain it to you. I'd be preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
To me, the whole thing. I don't care about going fast. I say this all the time. I don't get a kick out of it anymore. I did when I was 18. I don't anymore. I get a kick out of getting results out of stuff. That's what does it for me.
Yeah.
So to me, it could be a 17-second car or a 7-second car, and it makes zero difference. I don't care. I'm just as involved in the 17-second car as I would be in the 7-second car. I know a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around it, but that's just me. That's how I am.
Once you go fast, it's more fun to go slow.
Exactly. You get to a point. And I said this recently. I said, if I live, I'm 60 now. If I live another 20 fucking years, I will never drive another car that requires safety equipment. If I have to put on any sort of freaking fire jacket, if I got to sit in any type of cocoon, if I got to wear shit all over me, no. Let somebody else fucking do that. I've had it with that. No, done. I don't like it. So you have to pick your level. You have to find out what you're interested in, what turns you on. For me, it's taking a normally aspirated engine that is not supposed to make power and maximizing it so that it does make power. That's where I get my
challenges me.
Right.
But when you first start drag racing, you get addicted to the speed and you always want to go faster. And then once you finally get there, you realize, oh my God, this is expensive to do. It's more like work instead of fun. Oh, okay. I'm going to go backwards.
The biggest problem with speed is that you become acclimated to it.
Yeah. That's
so
exactly right.
The first time you drive a 14-second car, you're like, oh my God, that's fucking fast, right? And like a week later, it's like, this stone won't get out of its own way.
Yeah, you get jaded with it.
Right. And it does not change. It doesn't matter how fast you go. You become acclimated to it. So you make a couple of runs in a 10-second car, and it's like, oh God, the earth exploded in my face. And then like 5 runs later, it's like, come on, you bitch, go faster. It's like that with everything. So I learned that when I was young, and I was like, no, I'm gonna get off that gravy train.
That is
really
true.
don't care.
That is so true.
I know it's true, but try to explain that to people.
I know.
Everybody who hasn't gone fast is desperate to go fast. And then once they've gone fast a couple of times, it's like, okay, what next? All right, I think we got to wrap it up, bro. It's over 3 hours. It's 10 o'clock. I want to go spend a little time with my granddaughters.
Absolutely.
So, Andy, thank you so much. Thank David for me.
I sure will.
Anybody, Abel D, when was this time you attended SEMA? Never. I've never been to SEMA. I never will go to SEMA. That's not my thing. Fubar, I saw you in them earlier. Actually, Kat, they were just talking about you yesterday. I don't know who, Ari and Zero. I'm sure they were in and out of here. Guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have the best automotive community in all of YouTube.
Oh yeah.
And that's it. I'm going to pull a plug. Subscribe to Unity Motorsports Garage. Subscribe to David Vizard. Please go over there now and subscribe to David Vizard. And we have a lot more coming together.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna have a lot of fun. So I am going to pull the plug on this. And good night, my brother. And
good night, everybody. Good night, Tony. Thank y'all.